A disabled alien girl lies stranded in the Mojave Desert, her fate hanging in the balance until a human stumbles upon her. The scorching sun beats down mercilessly as Gaia, a young Zanari female, drags herself from the smoking wreckage of her scout ship. Her congenitally deformed leg hampers her movements, leaving a distinct trail in the sand. The ship's catastrophic engine failure has left Gaia disoriented and injured, her covert reconnaissance mission in ruins. As she activates her distress beacon, its weak signal barely penetrates the harsh desert air. Earth's successful defense against Zanari expansion has led to this desperate attempt to assess the planet's defenses, but now Gaia finds herself at the mercy of the very world she came to study. Miles away, Jeffrey James' equipment crackles to life, detecting an anomalous energy signature. The grizzled ex-military survival expert narrows his eyes, scanning the horizon. As part of a private security firm contracted by the U.S. government, Jeffrey's job is to monitor for extraterrestrial activity. He sets off to investigate, his weathered boots crunching on the sun-baked earth. As Jeffrey crests a dune, he spots the alien craft. His hand instinctively moves to his weapon, but he hesitates. Through his binoculars, he observes the injured Zanari struggling to distance herself from the crash site. Despite standing orders to report and not engage, Jeffrey makes a split-second decision that will alter the course of interspecies relations. Approaching cautiously, Jeffrey assesses the situation. The alien's labored breathing and obvious disability strike a chord within him. He holsters his weapon and kneels beside Gaia, who recoils in fear. With slow, deliberate movements, Jeffrey reaches for his first aid kit. The stakes couldn't be higher. Earth's governments stand on high alert, bracing for a potential full-scale Zanari invasion. Jeffrey's act of compassion flies in the face of official policy, risking severe consequences. Yet, as he begins to treat Gaia's wounds, he knows he's made the right choice. The harsh desert environment adds urgency to their predicament. The sun climbs higher, promising unbearable heat. Jeffrey's canteen sloshes with precious water. Enough for one, but for two? He pushes the thought aside, focusing on the immediate task of stabilizing Gaia's condition. In the distance, a dust cloud rises. Jeffrey tenses, aware that discovery by less sympathetic human forces could spell disaster. He must act quickly to ensure both their survival and secrecy. As he works, Jeffrey grapples with the magnitude of his decision. This moment, this choice to help rather than harm, could be the key to defusing the interspecies conflict. Gaia watches the human with a mixture of fear and fascination. Her people's intelligence on humans painted them as aggressive, xenophobic creatures. Yet here one kneels, tending to her injuries with unexpected gentleness. She chirps softly, attempting to communicate her gratitude. Jeffrey pauses, meeting Gaia's alien gaze. In her eyes, he sees not an enemy, but a sentient being in need. With renewed determination, he continues his ministrations, knowing that his actions here in the unforgiving Mojave might just change the course of history. As the sun climbs higher and the desert heat intensifies, human and alien forge an unlikely alliance. Their survival depends not only on overcoming the harsh environment, but also on bridging the vast gulf between their species. In this moment, on this scorching expanse of sand and rock, the fate of two civilizations hangs in the balance. Jeffrey's gaze swept the horizon once more, his mind racing with the gravity of his decision. The injured Zanari lay before him, her alien features twisted in pain. He knew he couldn't leave her here to die, but the implications of his choice greatly troubled on his conscience. With practiced efficiency, Jeffrey began to administer first aid. His calloused hands, more accustomed to handling weapons than bandages, moved with surprising gentleness as he assessed Gaia's injuries. The leg wound was severe, and signs of dehydration were evident in her mottled skin. "All right, let's get you out of this heat," Jeffrey muttered, more to himself than to the semi-conscious alien. He glanced at the wreckage of Gaia's ship, an idea forming. Moving quickly, Jeffrey salvaged pieces of the craft's lightweight hull, fashioning a crude but functional stretcher. With utmost care, he lifted Gaia onto the makeshift transport, mindful of her injuries and the peculiar deformity of her leg. As Jeffrey began the arduous task of dragging the stretcher across the unforgiving desert terrain, the sun beat down mercilessly. Sweat trickled down his face, stinging his eyes and leaving salty trails on his weathered cheeks. Every few minutes, he paused to scan their surroundings, his military training kicking in as he searched for any sign of threat or discovery. The journey to his emergency shelter was grueling. Jeffrey's muscles screamed in protest as he navigated the stretcher over sand dunes and around jagged rocks. He stopped periodically to check on Gaia, offering her small sips of water from his dwindling supply. Her alien eyes, filled with a mixture of fear and gratitude, met his each time. During one such stop, Jeffrey's keen ears picked up a distant rumble. He quickly pulled the stretcher behind a massive boulder, concealing them from view. Holding his breath, he watched as a military Humvee crested a nearby hill. The vehicle bore the insignia of the Extraterrestrial Defense Force, a sight that sent a chill down Jeffrey's spine. He recognized the unit, knowing full well their mandate to identify and neutralize alien threats. The Humvee slowed, its occupants surveying the area. Jeffrey's hand instinctively moved to his sidearm, his heart pounding in his chest. Seconds stretched into eternity as the vehicle idled nearby. Jeffrey could hear the crunch of boots on gravel as someone exited the Humvee. He tightened his grip on Gaia's stretcher, ready to move at a moment's notice. Just when he thought discovery was inevitable, the boots retreated and the engine roared back to life. The Humvee rolled away, leaving Jeffrey and Gaia undiscovered but shaken. As they resumed their journey, the reality of the situation hit Jeffrey full force. He wasn't just disobeying orders. He was potentially committing treason. Yet, looking down at the injured alien, he knew he couldn't have done anything else. Hours passed, each step more difficult than the last. Finally, as the sun began to dip towards the horizon, Jeffrey spotted the camouflaged entrance to his emergency shelter. With renewed energy, he pulled the stretcher the final distance to the hidden bunker. The cool air inside the shelter was a stark contrast to the scorching heat outside. Jeffrey carefully maneuvered Gaia off the stretcher and onto a cot. He moved swiftly around the small space, gathering medical supplies and activating the shelter systems. As he began to properly treat Gaia's injuries, Jeffrey marveled at the alien physiology before him. He cleaned and bandaged her wounds, set up and drip to combat dehydration, and monitored her vital signs as best he could with his limited knowledge of Zanari biology. While working, Jeffrey's fingers brushed against something embedded in Gaia's skin. Curious, he examined it closer, realizing it was some kind of device. On a hunch, he pressed what looked like an activation switch. A soft hum filled the air, and Jeffrey recognized it as a universal translator. "Well, that might come in handy," he murmured, glancing at the still unconscious Gaia. As night fell, the sounds of distant engines grew more frequent. Jeffrey knew the EDF was intensifying their search, scouring the desert for signs of the crashed ship and its occupant. He sat beside Gaia's cot, his mind racing with the enormity of what he'd done and the challenges that lay ahead. In the dim light of the shelter, Jeffrey watched the steady rise and fall of Gaia's chest. He had no idea how to proceed, how to keep her safe while navigating the treacherous waters he now found himself in. But as he listened to the drone of engines outside and the soft breathing of the alien he'd risked everything to save, Jeffrey knew one thing for certain. There was no turning back now. The first rays of dawn crept through the narrow ventilation slits of Jeffrey's underground shelter, casting thin lines of light across Gaia's alien features. Her eyes fluttered open, confusion evident in their depths as she took in her unfamiliar surroundings. Jeffrey, who had been dozing in a chair nearby, snapped to attention at her sudden movement. Gaia's hand instinctively reached for something on her suit, her fingers fumbling with a hidden panel. Jeffrey tensed, recognizing the motion. In a swift practice movement, he leaned forward and gently but firmly grasped her wrist. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," he said, his voice low and calm. "Your distress beacon won't work. I've made sure of that." The alien's eyes widened, a mixture of fear and defiance flashing across her face. She opened her mouth, emitting a series of clicks and chirps. Jeffrey frowned, then noticed a small device near her throat. On a hunch, he reached out and pressed what looked like an activation switch. A soft hum filled the air, and suddenly, Gaia's alien sounds transformed into recognizable words. "Release me, human," she demanded, her translated voice carrying a hint of electronic distortion. "You have no right to hold me captive." Jeffrey leaned back, releasing her wrist, but keeping his posture open and non-threatening. "I'm not holding you captive," he explained. "I saved your life. You were injured in the crash, remember?" Gaia's expression shifted from hostility to confusion, then to cautious curiosity. "You help me? Why would a human assist a Zanari?" Jeffrey sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "Because it was the right thing to do. Even if we're supposed to be enemies, I couldn't leave you out there to die." As he spoke, Jeffrey moved around the small shelter, gathering medical supplies to check on Gaia's injuries. The alien watched him warily, but made no move to stop him as he examined her wounds. "Your people. They don't understand us," Gaia said after a moment of silence. "The Zanari Empire, we're not conquerors. We're dying." Jeffrey paused in his ministrations, looking up at her with surprise. "What do you mean?" Gaia's alien features contorted in what Jeffrey interpreted as a grimace of pain. Whether physical or emotional, he couldn't tell. "Our population is in decline. A genetic disorder. It's causing widespread infertility. Earth humans. Your DNA might be our last hope." The revelation hung heavy in the air between them. Jeffrey opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, the distant sound of engines cut through the silence. His head snapped towards the shelter's entrance, body tensing. "EGF patrols," he muttered, moving quickly to a small monitoring station. "They've found your ship. We need to move." Gaia attempted to sit up, wincing as she did so. "Where will we go?" Jeffrey was already in motion, grabbing supplies and stuffing them into a backpack. "I know someone who might be able to help. A xenobiologist. But first, we need to get out of here without being spotted." He helped Gaia to her feet, supporting her weight as they made their way to a concealed exit. Outside, hidden beneath a camouflage tarp, sat an off-road vehicle. Jeffrey quickly loaded their supplies and helped Gaia into the passenger seat. Just as he was about to start the engine, a high-pitched whine filled the air. Jeffrey looked up to see a drone buzzing overhead, its camera clearly sweeping the area. "Down!" he hissed, pushing Gaia lower in her seat and ducking himself. They waited, hearts pounding, as the drone passed over them once, twice, then finally moved on. Jeffrey released a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. That was close. As he started the engine, a notification blinked on his communication device. Jeffrey's stomach dropped as he saw the name. Colonel Marcus Blackwood. With a grim expression, he answered the call. "Sir." "Jeffrey." The colonel's gruff voice came through. "Satellite imagery shows unusual activity in your sector. Report in immediately." Jeffrey's mind raced. He glanced at Gaia, then back at the device. "Copy that. Sir, I've detected what appears to be a meteorite impact. I'm en route to investigate now." There was a pause on the other end. "A meteorite? Are you sure about that, Jeffrey?" "As sure as I can be, sir," Jeffrey replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'll report my findings as soon as I reach the site." Another pause. "Very well. Keep me updated." The call ended, and Jeffrey let out a long breath. Gaia looked at him, her alien features unreadable. "You lied to protect me," she stated. Jeffrey nodded grimly as he put the vehicle in gear. "Yeah, I did. And now we're both in a world of trouble." As they pulled away from the shelter, Jeffrey quickly outlined his plan to Gaia. "I have a contact, Dr. Elena Rodriguez. She's a xenobiologist working at a secret facility in Nevada. If anyone can help us, it's her." Gaia nodded, then suddenly grimaced in pain. Jeffrey noticed with alarm that her leg wound was looking worse. "We need to get you to Elena fast," he muttered, pressing down on the accelerator. As they sped across the desert, the sun climbing higher in the sky, Jeffrey knew that every second counted. Behind them, the EDF was surely discovering his deception. Ahead lay an uncertain future and a dangerous journey. Gaia's labored breathing filled the cab of the vehicle, a constant reminder of the stakes. Jeffrey's hands tightened on the steering wheel as he navigated the rough terrain, his eyes constantly scanning for signs of pursuit. They were fugitives now, a human and an alien united by circumstance and a shared hope for peace. As the desert landscape blurred around them, Jeffrey couldn't help but wonder what challenges lay ahead, and whether this unlikely alliance could truly change the course of human-Zanari relations. As the desert landscape blurred around them, Jeffrey couldn't help but wonder what challenges lay ahead, and whether this unlikely alliance could truly change the course of human-Zanari interaction. The first rays of dawn painted the sky in hues of orange and pink as Jeffrey and Gaia emerged from their makeshift shelter in a small cave. They had driven through the night, stopping only when Gaia's condition had worsened to the point where Jeffrey knew they needed rest. Gaia's skin felt hot to the touch, and her breathing had become labored. Jeffrey placed a hand on her forehead, his brow furrowing with concern. "You're burning up," he muttered, reaching for his canteen. As Gaia sipped the water, Jeffrey surveyed their surroundings. The Nevada desert stretched out before them, a vast expanse of sand and rock. He knew they needed to reach Dr. Elena Rodriguez's secret research facility as quickly as possible. But Gaia's deteriorating condition presented a significant challenge. "We need to get moving," Jeffrey said, his eyes scanning the horizon for any signs of EDF patrols. "Can you walk?" Gaia attempted to stand, but her injured leg buckled beneath her. She let out a hiss of pain, her alien features contorting. Jeffrey's mind raced, searching for a solution. His eyes fell on a cluster of sturdy branches near the cave entrance. "Hold on," he said, moving quickly to gather the branches. With practiced efficiency, he began fashioning a makeshift crutch, using strips torn from his shirt to secure the pieces together. This should help. Gaia eyed the crude device with a mixture of curiosity and gratitude. With Jeffrey's assistance, she managed to position herself, leaning heavily on the crutch. "Thank you," she said, her translated voice carrying a note of genuine appreciation. They set out across the unforgiving terrain, Jeffrey constantly on alert for any signs of pursuit. His years of military training kicked in as he navigated them through the landscape, using natural formations for cover and choosing paths that would make them difficult to track. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the heat became oppressive. Jeffrey rationed their water carefully, knowing they had a long journey ahead. Gaia's condition continued to worsen, her movements becoming more labored with each passing hour. They had just crested a small hill when Jeffrey heard the distant whine of engines. He quickly pulled Gaia down behind a large boulder, his heart pounding in his chest. Moments later, 2 EDF vehicles roared past, kicking up clouds of dust in their wake. "That was close," Jeffrey whispered, waiting until the sound of engines had faded completely before signaling it was safe to move. As they continued their journey, Jeffrey's mind wandered to Colonel Marcus Blackwood. He knew the man well enough to be certain that a massive manhunt was underway. The thought of being labeled a traitor and alien collaborator sent a chill down his spine, but one look at Gaia's determined struggle to keep moving strengthened his tenacity. By mid-afternoon, they stumbled upon an abandoned mining town. The dilapidated buildings stood as silent sentinels in the desert, offering both potential refuge and danger. Jeffrey's instincts told him they might find valuable supplies here, and possibly even transportation. "Wait here," he instructed Gaia, helping her settle in the shadow of a weathered wooden structure. "I'm going to take a look around." Jeffrey moved cautiously through the ghost town, his senses on high alert. In what appeared to be an old general store, he found some canned food and a first aid kit. But the real prize awaited him behind the building, an old pickup truck, its paint faded and peeling under the relentless sun. Excitement surged through him as he approached the vehicle. The tires were surprisingly intact, and when he popped the hood, the engine looked to be in reasonable condition. Jeffrey sent up a silent prayer as he slipped into the driver's seat and turned the key, which had been left in the ignition. The engine coughed and sputtered, then roared to life. Jeffrey let out a whoop of triumph, quickly checking the fuel gauge. There was just enough to get them significantly closer to their destination. He drove the truck back to where he had left Gaia, helping her into the passenger seat. As he started the engine again, the loud rumble echoed through the empty town. Jeffrey cursed under his breath, knowing the noise could attract unwanted attention. His fears were confirmed moments later as an HFY patrol vehicle appeared on the horizon, rapidly closing the distance. Jeffrey slammed the accelerator, and the old truck lurched forward, kicking up a cloud of dust. "Hold on," he shouted to Gaia as he maneuvered the vehicle over the uneven terrain. The HFY patrol gave chase, their more advanced vehicle quickly gaining ground. Jeffrey's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as he pushed the truck to its limits. He swerved around rock formations and through dry creek beds, using every trick he knew to lose their pursuers. Gaia, despite her weakened state, kept watch through the rear window, calling out the patrol's movements. Just when it seemed they might be overtaken, a stroke of luck came in the form of a sudden dust storm. Jeffrey plunged into the swirling sand, using the near-zero visibility to his advantage. The old truck protested as he pushed it hard, the sound of scraping metal joining the howl of the wind. When they finally emerged from the other side of the storm, the HFY patrol was nowhere to be seen. Jeffrey allowed himself a moment of relief before reality set in. The truck had taken a beating, and the engine was now making an ominous clicking sound. They managed a few more miles before the vehicle gave out completely, smoke billowing from under the hood. Jeffrey guided it to a stop, knowing they would have to continue on foot. As they resumed their journey, Gaia's strength began to fail her. The infection that had taken hold was sapping her energy, and even with a makeshift crutch, she struggled to keep pace. Jeffrey found himself supporting more and more of her weight, eventually resorting to carrying her for stretches at a time. The sun was setting when they crested a final ridge, and Jeffrey's heart leaped as he saw structures in the distance. They were nearing the outskirts of the secret research facility. But as relief washed over him, he noticed movement in his peripheral vision. Instinctively, he ducked behind a large rock formation, cradling Gaia protectively. As he peered out, he saw a figure approaching, a man in a lab coat, carrying scientific equipment. Jeffrey tensed, ready for a confrontation, but something about the man's demeanor gave him pause. The stranger stopped short, his eyes widening as he took in the sight of Jeffrey and the alien. For a moment, no one moved. Then the man spoke, his voice filled with a mix of caution and curiosity. "I'm Dr. Samuel Gray," he said, slowly raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "And I think you two might need some help." "Help?" Dr. Gray's eyes darted between Jeffrey and Gaia, a mixture of scientific curiosity and concern evident in his expression. Jeffrey hesitated for a moment, then slowly stood up, supporting Gaia as he did so. "We do," he admitted. "My name is Jeffrey, and this is Gaia. She's injured and needs medical attention." Dr. Gray nodded, his initial shock giving way to professional focus. "Follow me," he said, gesturing towards a nearby building. "We have a medical bay inside." As they made their way to the facility, Jeffrey filled Dr. Gray in on their situation. The scientist listened intently, his brow furrowing as he processed the implications of their story. Once inside, they were met by a woman in a lab coat, her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. "Sam, what's going on?" she asked, her eyes widening as she took in the sight of Gaia. "Dr. Elena Rodriguez," Dr. Gray said by way of introduction. "We have a situation." Dr. Rodriguez quickly took charge, directing them to the medical bay. As she began examining Gaia, Jeffrey felt a wave of relief wash over him. They had made it to the facility, and Gaia was finally receiving the care she needed. Hours passed as Dr. Rodriguez worked tirelessly to treat Gaia's injuries and the infection that had taken hold. Jeffrey paced anxiously outside the medical bay, his mind racing with thoughts of the Edea pursuit and the uncertain future that lay ahead. Finally, Dr. Rodriguez emerged, a look of excitement on her face. "Jeffrey," she called, motioning for him to follow her. "You need to see this." Inside the lab, Dr. Rodriguez pulled up a series of complex biochemical diagrams on a large screen. "While treating Gaia, I made an extraordinary discovery," she explained, her voice filled with awe-inspiring enthusiasm. "There's a unique protein in her blood that could be the key to solving both the Zanari infertility crisis and several human genetic disorders." Jeffrey stared at the screen, trying to make sense of the complex molecular structures. "What does this mean?" he asked. "It means we might have just stumbled upon a path to peaceful cooperation between humans and Zanari," Dr. Rodriguez replied. "This could revolutionize medicine for both species." As the implications of this discovery sank in, Jeffrey's mind began to race. He thought of Colonel Blackwood, of the EDF's pursuit, and of the potential for a diplomatic solution to the growing tension between humans and Zanari. "We need to contact Colonel Blackwood," Jeffrey said suddenly. "If we can show him this, it might change everything." Dr. Gray nodded in agreement. "We have a secure communication system here. We can reach out to him." Jeffrey took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. He knew that contacting Blackwood was a risk, but it was a risk they had to take. With Dr. Rodriguez's discovery, they had a chance to change the course of human-Zanari relations. As Dr. Gray set up the communication system, Jeffrey formulated his plan. He would request a face-to-face meeting with Blackwood, using the promise of crucial information as bait. It was a gamble, but one that could pay off in ways they couldn't even imagine. The screen flickered to life, and Colonel Blackwood's stern face appeared. His eyes narrowed as he recognized Jeffrey. "Agent Walker," he said, his voice cold. "You have a lot of explaining to do." Jeffrey met the colonel's gaze steadily. "Sir, I need to meet with you in person. I have information that could change everything we thought we knew about the Zanari." Blackwood's expression remained impassive, but Jeffrey could see a flicker of interest in his eyes. After a moment of tense silence, the colonel spoke. "Very well, Walker. I'll be there with a security detail in 2 hours. This had better be good." As the communication ended, Jeffrey turned to Dr. Rodriguez and Dr. Gray. "We have 2 hours to prepare. Let's make them count." They worked quickly, compiling research data and preparing their presentation. Gaia, now more stable thanks to Dr. Rodriguez's treatment, insisted on being present for the meeting. Despite her weakened state, her willpower was unwavering. As the appointed time drew near, tension filled the air. The sound of approaching vehicles signaled the arrival of Colonel Blackwood and his team. Jeffrey took a deep breath, knowing that what happened next would shape the future of human-Zanari relations. The facility's door slid open, revealing Colonel Blackwood flanked by armed guards. His eyes swept the room, taking in the sight of Jeffrey, the scientist, and finally landing on Gaia. For a moment, no one moved. Then Jeffrey stepped forward, his voice steady as he began to explain the situation. "Colonel, what we've discovered here could change everything. Everything we thought we knew about the Zanari." Jeffrey paused, his eyes meeting Blackwood's. "And it might just save both our species." Before Blackwood could respond, the facility's alarm system blared to life. Dr. Gray rushed to a nearby console, his fingers flying over the keyboard. "We've got incoming," he announced, his voice tense. "A Zanari ship is approaching fast." Blackwood's hand instinctively moved to his sidearm. "Is this your doing, Walker?" he demanded. Jeffrey shook his head, his expression a mix of surprise and concern. "No! Sir, I had no idea they were coming." The facility trembled as the Zanari ship touched down nearby. Blackwood barked orders to his security team, positioning them defensively around the room. Jeffrey moved to stand protectively near Gaia, while Dr. Rodriguez and Dr. Gray exchanged worried glances. Moments later, the facility's doors slid open, revealing a delegation of Zanari officials. At their head stood Ambassador Zorn, his towering figure casting a long shadow across the room. Intricate markings adorned his skin, pulsing faintly in the fluorescent light. Zorn's eyes narrowed as he took in the scene before him. "We demand an explanation for the capture and mistreatment of our kind," he declared, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the air. Jeffrey stepped forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Ambassador Zorn, I'm Jeffrey Walker. There's been a misunderstanding. I didn't capture Gaia. I rescued her." As all eyes turned to him, Jeffrey recounted the events of the past few days. He spoke of finding Gaia injured and alone, of their harrowing journey across the desert, and of the discovery made at the research facility. His voice remained steady, filled with compassion for Gaia and hope for what their encounter could mean. As Jeffrey finished his account, a palpable shift occurred in the room. The Zanari delegation exchanged glances, their earlier hostility giving way to cautious curiosity. Dr. Rodriguez seized the moment, stepping forward with a tablet in hand. "Ambassador Zorn, if I may," she began, her voice filled with nearly unleashed excitement. "While treating Gaia, we made an extraordinary discovery." She brought up a series of complex biochemical diagrams on the tablet screen. "There's a unique protein in Zanari blood that could be the key to solving your species' infertility crisis. Not only that, but it has the potential to cure several human genetic disorders as well." Ambassador Zorn leaned in, his eyes widening as he studied the diagrams. The other Zanari clustered around, murmuring in their native language. The tense atmosphere in the room began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of cautious optimism. Colonel Blackwood relaxed his stance slightly, though his eyes remained alert. Just as the two groups began to engage in tentative discussion, a sharp beep cut through the air. Dr. Gray rushed to a nearby computer terminal, his face paling as he read the incoming message. "Colonel Blackwood," he called out, his voice strained. "We're receiving an urgent communication from EDF headquarters. You need to see this." Blackwood strode over to the terminal, his brow furrowing as he read the message. He turned to face the room, his expression grim. "Satellite imagery has detected a massive Zanari fleet approaching Earth's solar system," he announced. "It's far larger than anything we've ever encountered." A shocked silence fell over the room. Human and Zanari alike exchanged looks of alarm and confusion. Ambassador Zorn stepped forward, his posture rigid. "This is impossible," he declared. "The High Council has not authorized any such action." Blackwood's eyes narrowed. "Then who's controlling that fleet, Ambassador?" Zorn's markings pulsed rapidly as he processed this information. After a moment he spoke, his voice heavy. "There is a faction among our military, hardliners who have grown frustrated with diplomatic efforts. It appears they have launched an unauthorized invasion attempt." The revelation sent shockwaves through both human and Zanari delegations. The room erupted into a flurry of urgent conversations and hurried communications. Amidst the chaos, Jeffrey noticed Gaia struggling to stand. He moved to her side, supporting her as she addressed the room. "We must act quickly," she said, her voice weak but determined. "This threat endangers both our peoples. We have an opportunity here, a chance to forge an alliance that could save both our species." Her words cut through the noise, drawing all eyes to her. Colonel Blackwood nodded slowly, his tactical mind already formulating a plan. "Ambassador Zorn," he said, turning to the Zanari leader, "I propose we form a joint task force to address this threat. We can use this facility as our command center." Zorn considered the offer for a moment before nodding. "Agreed. We must prevent this catastrophe and show the strength of our newfound cooperation." As the two leaders began to outline their strategy, Jeffrey felt a glimmer of hope. He looked around the room, seeing humans and Zanari working side by side, united against a common threat. Dr. Rodriguez approached him, her eyes bright with dedication. "Jeffrey, we need to adapt our research. If we can develop non-lethal weapons based on Zanari biology, we might be able to incapacitate the invading force without causing permanent harm." Jeffrey nodded, his mind racing with possibilities. "I can help with that. My experience with both human and Zanari technology could be useful." As the facility transformed into a hive of activity, Jeffrey found himself at the center of it all. With Gaia by his side, he worked tirelessly to bridge the gap between human and Zanari forces, translating complex technologies and tactics. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Engineers from both species collaborated on integrating Zanari technology with Earth's defense systems. Scientists huddled over laboratories, racing to develop new weapons and defenses. As night fell, Jeffrey stepped outside for a moment of quiet. He looked up at the stars, knowing that somewhere out there a hostile fleet was approaching. The weight of responsibility settled heavily on his shoulders. Gaia joined him, her presence a comfort in the face of the enormous task ahead. "We've come so far," she said softly, "but our greatest challenge still lies ahead." Jeffrey nodded, his eyes still fixed on the night sky. "Whatever happens, we're in this together now. Humans and Zanari, united against a common threat." As they stood there, the facility behind them hummed with activity. The joint task force worked through the night, preparing for the battle that would determine the fate of both their worlds. Species. As they turned to head back inside, a sudden crackle of static burst from their communication devices. Dr. Gray's voice came through, distorted and barely intelligible. "Experiencing disruptions. Systems failing." Jeffrey and Gaia exchanged alarmed glances before rushing back into the facility. The scene inside was one of controlled chaos. Screens flickered with interference, and both human and Zanari technicians frantically worked at their stations, trying to maintain communications. Dr. Gray stood at the center of the room, his face illuminated by the glow of multiple screens. "We're experiencing widespread electromagnetic disturbances," he announced as Jeffrey approached. "It's affecting both our systems and the Zanaris." Colonel Blackwood strode over, his brow furrowed. "What's causing this? Is it an attack from the approaching fleet?" "No, sir," Dr. Gray replied, shaking his head. "It appears to be an unintended consequence of their approach. The interaction between Earth's magnetosphere and the Zanari cloaking technology is creating a planet-wide disruption." Ambassador Zorn joined the group, his markings pulsing with concern. "This is unprecedented. Our fleet has never approached a planet with such a strong magnetic field before." Jeffrey's mind raced, analyzing the situation. "If we can't stabilize our communications, our entire defense plan falls apart," he said. "We need a solution fast." For a moment, the room fell silent as the gravity of the situation sank in. Then Jeffrey's eyes lit up with an idea. What if we could use the Zanari's shielding technology to our advantage? He proposed. We could deploy a network of high-altitude drones equipped with modified Zanari shields to stabilize the electromagnetic field around Earth. Dr. Gray nodded slowly, his fingers already tapping away at a nearby console. It's possible. Yes, with the right modifications, it could work. Colonel Blackwood considered the proposal, his expression grave. It's a risky plan, Walker. We'd be relying heavily on untested alien tech. Before Jeffrey could respond, Ambassador Zorn stepped forward. I will personally oversee the technology transfer and adaptation process, he declared. You have my word that we will do everything in our power to ensure its success. The colonel's stance softened slightly at this gesture of trust. Very well, he said after a moment's consideration. Let's make it happen. The facility erupted into a flurry of activity. Human and Zanari engineers huddled together, poring over schematics and debating technical specifications. Dr. Rodriguez and Gaia found themselves at the heart of the efforts, their unique perspectives proving invaluable in bridging the technological gap between the two species. As the work progressed, reports began flooding in from around the globe. Panic was spreading as news of the impending invasion leaked to the public. Riots broke out in major cities, and some nations threatened preemptive strikes against the approaching Zanari fleet. Colonel Blackwood paced the command center, issuing rapid-fire orders to contain the growing chaos. We need to maintain order, he growled. If we start fighting among ourselves, we're done for before the invasion even begins. Jeffrey watched as EDF forces were diverted to quell the unrest, knowing that every soldier sent to maintain peace was one less defender against the coming threat. The weight of their task seemed to grow heavier with each passing minute. Hours blurred together as the joint team worked tirelessly to bring Jeffrey's plan to fruition. Dr. Gray emerged from a sea of cables and components, his eyes bloodshot but triumphant. The AI system for coordinating the drone network is online, he announced. It's a fusion of human and Zanari coding languages. Nothing like it has ever existed before. As the first wave of drones was prepared for launch, a new complication arose. The electromagnetic disturbances had intensified, creating localized storms in the upper atmosphere. The drones won't survive those conditions, Dr. Rodriguez said, her voice tight with concern. They'll be torn apart before they can form a stable network. Jeffrey stared at the meteorological data, his mind racing. He knew what had to be done. We need someone to guide them through manually, he said, turning to face Colonel Blackwood. I volunteer to pilot the lead aircraft. The colonel opened his mouth to protest, but Ambassador Zorn interrupted. I will accompany him, the Zanari declared. My knowledge of our technology may prove crucial to the mission's success. For a moment, the room fell silent, the unlikely pairing of human and Zanari volunteers hanging in the air. Then Colonel Blackwood nodded sharply. Go, and Godspeed to you both. As Jeffrey and Ambassador Zorn made their way to the specially modified aircraft, Gaia caught up with them. Her eyes met Jeffrey's, conveying a mix of concern and commitment. Be careful up there, she said softly. We'll be monitoring your progress and providing support from here. Jeffrey nodded, squeezing her hand briefly before climbing into the cockpit. As the canopy closed, he saw Dr. Rodriguez and Dr. Gray give him a thumbs up from the control room. The engines roared to life, and the aircraft began its ascent into the turbulent skies. Beside him, Ambassador Zorn's markings pulsed with a steady rhythm, a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding outside. As they broke through the cloud cover, the true scope of their challenge became apparent. The sky was alive with swirling patterns of energy, bolts of lightning arcing between roiling storm clouds. Initiating drone release sequence, Jeffrey announced, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. One by one, the specialized drones detached from the aircraft, their Zanari-modified shields glowing faintly as they entered the electromagnetic maelstrom. Ambassador Zorn's fingers danced across a holographic interface, making real-time adjustments to the drone's shield harmonics. "We must guide them to the most stable paths," he said, his eyes never leaving the display. "The network must be perfectly aligned to counteract the disruptions." As they pushed deeper into the storm, the aircraft began to shudder violently. Warning lights flashed across the cockpit, and for a heart-stopping moment, Jeffrey thought they might lose control entirely. "Walker," Dr. Gray's voice crackled through the comm system. "We're detecting a massive surge in electromagnetic activity directly ahead of you. You need to—" The transmission cut off abruptly as a blinding flash of energy engulfed the aircraft. Jeffrey gripped the controls, fighting to keep them airborne as alarms blared around him. Through the chaos, he could hear Ambassador Zorn shouting something, but the words were lost in the deafening roar of the storm. As the light faded, Jeffrey blinked away the afterimages, his heart pounding. The aircraft had somehow held together, but the drones— He looked out the window, expecting to see their mission in ruins. Instead, his eyes widened in amazement. The drones had not only survived, but seemed to be thriving in the electromagnetic turmoil. They moved with newfound purpose, weaving an intricate web of energy that began to stabilize the turbulent atmosphere. "It's working," Ambassador Zorn breathed, his markings pulsing with excitement. The surge must have activated some latent capability in the Zanari shielding technology. As they watched, the network of drones expanded, pushing back against the electromagnetic disturbances. Slowly but surely, the skies began to clear. Jeffrey allowed himself a small smile as he keyed the comm system. "Control, this is Walker. The drone network is online and functioning beyond expectations. We're heading back to base." As they turned the aircraft around, Jeffrey couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. They had overcome this hurdle together, human and Zanari working as one. But he knew their greatest challenge still lay ahead. The rogue Zanari fleet was still approaching, and Earth's fate hung in the balance. With the skies now stable, Jeffrey pushed the aircraft to its limits, racing back to the facility. Time was running out, and they needed to prepare for the final confrontation that would determine the future of both their species. As they descended through the atmosphere, the true test of their mission began. The aircraft shuddered violently as it plunged into the heart of the electromagnetic storm. Jeffrey gripped the controls, his knuckles tightening with effort. Ambassador Zorn's markings pulsed rapidly, reflecting the intensity of their situation. "Shields at 60%. Zorn called out, his fingers dancing across the holographic display. "We're encountering far more resistance than anticipated." Jeffrey nodded grimly, pulling back on the stick to maintain altitude. "Hang on," he shouted over the roar of the engines. "We're going to push through the worst of it." The plane lurched sideways as a massive bolt of energy struck their port wing. Warning klaxons blared throughout the cockpit, and red lights flashed across every console. "We've lost primary stabilizers," Jeffrey reported, fighting to keep the aircraft level. "Switching to backup systems." On the ground, the tension was palpable. Gaia's eyes darted between multiple screens, monitoring the aircraft's descent and the drone network's performance. "They're encountering severe turbulence," she announced, her voice tight with concern. Dr. Rodriguez looked up from her workstation, worry etched across her face. "The drones aren't adapting fast enough to the storm's intensity. We need to recalibrate their programming on the fly." Dr. Gray nodded, his fingers flying across his keyboard. "I'm on it. Gaia, can you interface with the Zanari systems? We need to boost the shield harmonics." As the team worked feverishly to support Jeffrey and Zorn's perilous flight, the aircraft continued its treacherous descent. Suddenly, a blinding flash of light engulfed the plane, and all systems went dark. "EMP!" Zorn shouted, his markings flaring with alarm. We've lost main power. Jeffrey's mind raced as he assessed their options. With several key systems disabled, they were losing altitude rapidly. We need to find a place to set her down, he said, scanning the terrain below through breaks in the storm clouds. As they broke through a particularly dense layer of clouds, Jeffrey's eyes widened. There, he pointed. That canyon might give us enough shelter for an emergency landing. Zorn nodded, adjusting what few systems remained operational to assist with the landing. As they approached the canyon, however, something caught his eye. Jeffrey, he said, his voice low and urgent. Look there in the shadows. Nestled deep within the canyon was a sleek, dark shape that was unmistakably Zanari in design. A scout ship using the electromagnetic disturbances as cover. They've sent advanced scouts, Jeffrey muttered, his mind racing with the implications. We need to alert the base. But as he reached for the comm system, he remembered. Their communications were down. They were on their own. With no other choice, Jeffrey focused on bringing the damaged aircraft down safely. The landing was rough, the plane skidding across the uneven terrain before coming to a stop dangerously close to the canyon's edge. Jeffrey and Zorn emerged from the cockpit, both nursing minor injuries from the impact. They crouched low, using the wreckage of their plane as cover while they assessed the situation. That scout ship poses a significant threat to the entire defense plan, Zorn whispered, his markings dim to avoid detection. Jeffrey nodded, his eyes never leaving the Zanari vessel. We can't let them relay any information back to the main fleet. We need to neutralize that ship. Agreed, Zorn replied. But how? We're outnumbered and outgunned. A grim smile played across Jeffrey's lips. We'll use their own tactics against them. The electromagnetic interference that nearly killed us, it's going to be our cover. As they formulated their plan, Jeffrey couldn't help but think of Gaia and the others back at the facility. He knew they would be working tirelessly to re-establish contact and potentially mount a rescue operation. But time was not on their side. At the research facility, Gaia's brow furrowed as she noticed anomalies in the drone network data. Colonel, she called out, gesturing to her screen. I'm detecting unusual patterns consistent with a cloaked Zanari ship. Colonel Blackwood strode over, his face grim. Where? In the same general area where we lost contact with Jeffrey and Ambassador Zorn, Gaia replied, her voice tight with worry. The colonel's heart made. Dispatch a search and rescue team immediately, he ordered. And get me any information you can on that potential Zanari presence. As the facility buzzed with renewed activity, Jeffrey and Zorn began their approach to the scout ship. They moved cautiously, using the rocky terrain and electromagnetic interference to mask their advance. Remember, Jeffrey whispered as they neared the ship, our primary objective is to disable their communications and gather intel. We need to capture this ship intact if possible. Zorn nodded, his markings pulsing with a mix of tension and tenacity. I can bypass their security protocols, but we'll need to move quickly once we're inside. As they reached the scout ship's outer hull, they could hear muffled voices from within, the unmistakable cadence of Zanari speech. But with an edge of fanaticism that made Zorn's markings flicker with concern. Extremists, he murmured. This may be more difficult than we anticipated. Jeffrey's hand tightened on his makeshift weapon, a piece of their crashed aircraft, modified with Zorn's help to disrupt Zanari technology. Then we'll need to be smarter and faster, he replied. Ready. Zorn nodded, placing his hand on the ship's access panel. With a series of quick, precise movements, he bypassed the security measures and the airlock hissed open. They slipped inside, immediately coming face to face with a startled Zanari crew member. Before the alien could raise an alarm, Jeffrey struck, his improvised weapon emitting a pulse that sent the Zanari crumpling to the ground, unconscious. Nice work, Zorn whispered, dragging the incapacitated crew member into a nearby storage compartment. The bridge should be this way. As they made their way through the ship's corridors, the gravity of their situation sank in. They were deep in enemy territory, cut off from support, with the fate of two worlds resting on their success. Back at the facility, Gaia's breakthrough in stabilizing the electromagnetic field had allowed for limited communication with some of the deployed drones. Dr. Gray seized the opportunity, redirecting a portion of the network to search for Jeffrey and Zorn. "If we can get eyes on their position," he explained to Colonel Blackwood, "we might be able to provide them with some form of support." The colonel nodded, his expression grave. "Do it, but be prepared to abort if." His words were cut short as an aide burst into the room, face pale. "Sir, we've just received word. The rogue Zanari fleet has accelerated its approach. They'll be here much sooner than we anticipated." A heavy silence fell over the room as the implications sank in. Colonel Blackwood's gaze swept over the assembled team, human and Zanari alike, before settling on the long-range sensor displays showing the approaching threat. "Well," he said, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment, "it seems our timeline has changed. Dr. Rodriguez, how are those non-lethal weapons coming along?" Dr. Rodriguez looked up from her workstation, commitment etched across her features. "We're making progress. Sir, the fusion of human and Zanari tech is yielding some promising results." The colonel nodded. "Good. We may need them sooner than we thought." He turned to address the entire room. "Listen up, everyone. We're now operating on borrowed time. Whatever you're working on, I need it done yesterday. The fate of both our species depends on what we do in the next few hours." As the facility erupted into a flurry of renewed activity, Jeffrey and Zorn continued their stealthy advance through the Zanari scout ship. They were nearing the bridge, where they hoped to find not only the ship's control systems, but also the vital intelligence they needed about the rogue fleet's plans. Jeffrey's heart raced as they approached the final corridor. He knew that beyond the next door lay either their greatest opportunity or their ultimate failure. With a nod to Zorn, he readied himself for whatever they might face. The door slid open, revealing the bridge and its crew. For a split second, time seemed to stand still as human and Zanari locked eyes, the fate of two worlds hanging in the balance. Balance. In that frozen moment, Jeffrey's hand tightened on his weapon, ready to strike. But before he could act, a voice cut through the tension. "Wait!" A young Zanari technician stepped forward, her markings pulsing with urgency. "Ambassador Zorn, I recognize you. I want to help." Jeffrey hesitated, his gaze darting between Zorn and the newcomer. Zorn's markings flickered with surprise, then cautious hope. "Lyra," Zorn asked, his voice low, "what are you doing here? I was assigned to this ship, but I can't support their extremist views any longer." Lyra explained quickly, her eyes darting to the other crew members who stood frozen in shock. "I can help you disable the security systems." Jeffrey lowered his weapon slightly, but remained alert. "How do we know we can trust you?" Lyra's markings pulsed with sincerity. "Because I believe in the alliance between our species. This war, it's wrong." Zorn nodded to Jeffrey. "We need her help. We don't have time for distrust." With a quick nod, Jeffrey gestured for Lyra to proceed. She moved swiftly to a nearby console, her fingers flying over the controls. Within moments, the ship's internal alarms went silent. "I've disabled the security protocols," Lyra announced. "We have full access to the ship's systems now." Jeffrey quickly secured the other crew members, while Zorn accessed the ship's main computer. His markings flashed with excitement as he scrolled through the data. "This is it," he breathed. "Detailed plans of the rogue fleet's invasion strategy. Look here, there's a weakness in their formation." As they pored over the information, a crackling sound filled the air. The ship's communication system was coming to life, carrying a fragmented transmission. "Jeffrey, Zorn, do you copy? This is Colonel Blackwood. Weave. Risky move. Communication corridor. Electromagnetic shield compromised. Jeffrey rushed to the console. Colonel, we hear you. We've secured the scout ship and obtained critical intelligence about the rogue fleet's plans. As Jeffrey relayed the information, alarms suddenly blared throughout the ship. Lyra's markings pulsed with fear. They've overridden my security lockout. The extremist crew is attempting to retake the ship. Zorn quickly initiated the ship's lockdown protocol, sealing the bridge. We're trapped, but so are they. We need to find a way to transmit this data and implement a defense strategy. Outside the ship, the electromagnetic storm intensified. The drone network, visible through the ship's viewports, flickered and wavered under the onslaught. At the research facility, Gaia's fingers danced across her console. The electromagnetic disturbances are reaching critical levels. We need to stabilize the field, or we'll lose our entire defense network. Dr. Rodriguez looked up from her work on the non-lethal weapons. What if we create a resonance frequency to counter the disturbances? We could use both human and Zanari tech to calibrate it precisely. Dr. Gray nodded, already moving to adjust their equipment. It's risky, but it might be our only chance. Gaia, can you interface with the Zanari systems to boost the output? As they worked feverishly to implement their plan, Colonel Blackwood received another transmission from the scout ship. Colonel, Jeffrey's voice came through, strained but determined. We're under siege here. The extremist crew is trying to break through. We need a way to maintain control of this ship and use its systems to stabilize the electromagnetic field. Gaia's eyes widened as an idea struck her. The scout ship's advanced systems. We could use them to create a localized field that could stabilize the larger disturbances. Colonel Blackwood nodded grimly. It's our best shot, but they'll need equipment to reconfigure the ship's core systems. He turned to Dr. Gray. Doctor, how quickly can we get that experimental hybrid aircraft ready for flight? Dr. Gray's expression was a mix of purpose and apprehension. It's not fully tested, but it's our only option for delivering the equipment through this storm. I'll pilot it myself. As Dr. Gray rushed to prepare for his perilous mission, the first wave of the rogue Zanari fleet breached Earth's outer atmosphere. The electromagnetic disturbances spiked, causing widespread communications blackouts across the globe. In major cities, panic spread as defense systems faltered. The research facility screens filled with distress signals and reports of failing infrastructure. Back on the scout ship, Jeffrey, Zorn, and Lyra worked frantically to hold their position. The sounds of the extremist crew attempting to break through the sealed doors echoed through the bridge. We need to buy more time, Jeffrey said, his mind racing. Lyra, is there any way to extend the lockdown protocols? Lyra's markings pulsed with concentration as she worked at the console. I can reroute some of the ship's power to reinforce the seals, but it won't hold forever. Zorn looked up from the ship's long-range sensors, his markings flashing with alarm. We have another problem. There's a second Zanari fleet approaching from the opposite direction. Jeffrey's heart sank. Reinforcements for the rogue fleet? Zorn shook his head, uncertainty clear in his voice. I'm not sure. It could be the main Zanari force responding to the rogue fleet's actions. But whether they're here to help or hinder us, I can't say. As they grappled with this new development, the ship shuddered under the renewed assault of the extremist crew. Jeffrey gripped the edge of the console, his eyes meeting Zorn's and then Lyra's. They all knew that the next few hours would determine not just their fate, but the fate of two entire species. Outside, the storm raged on, Earth's fragile defenses wavering under the onslaught. And somewhere in that chaos, Dr. Gray piloted his experimental craft, racing against time to deliver the equipment that could turn the tide of this interstellar conflict. Crisis. And somewhere in that chaos, Dr. Gray piloted his experimental craft, racing against time to deliver the equipment that could turn the tide of this interstellar conflict. As the scout ship trembled under another assault from the extremist crew, a sudden burst of static from the communication console caught Jeffrey's attention. Through the crackling interference, a fragmented message emerged. Detecting. Large fleet. Approaching. Zorn's markings pulsed with surprise as he quickly accessed the long-range sensors. Jeffrey, look at this, he said, gesturing to the screen. Jeffrey leaned in, his eyes widening as he took in the data. Another Zanari fleet? But why? Lyra, her fingers still dancing across the ship's controls, spoke up. The signal pattern. It's consistent with the High Council's protocols. This could be a peacekeeping force. Before they could process this new information, the ship's communication array crackled to life once more. This time, Colonel Blackwood's voice came through, clearer than before. Jeffrey, Zorn, we detected the approach of a second Zanari fleet. Dr. Rodriguez believes they might be here to intercept the rogue force. We're attempting to establish communication. Jeffrey's mind raced with the implications. Copy that, Colonel. We'll do what we can from here to assist. As if on cue, the ship shuddered violently. The extremist crew's efforts to breach the command center were intensifying. Jeffrey quickly assessed their situation, his military training kicking in. Zorn, Lyra, we need to fortify our position. Use whatever we can find to create barricades. I'll see if I can repurpose any of the ship's internal systems for defense. They worked swiftly, dragging consoles and equipment to block the entrances. Jeffrey managed to reroute power from non-essential systems to create energy barriers at key points. Outside the ship, the electromagnetic storm raged on. But through the chaos, a small craft approached, buffeted by the violent energy surrounding it. Inside the experimental aircraft, Dr. Gray gripped the controls tightly, his knuckles tightening with tension. The hybrid technology groaned under the stress of the electromagnetic disturbances. Alarms blared as the craft pitched and yawed. Come on, hold together. Gray muttered through gritted teeth as he executed a series of complex maneuvers, narrowly avoiding a particularly nasty surge of energy. As he neared the scout ship's location, Gray activated a series of specialized drones. They shot out from the craft, creating a network of sensors and communication relays around the area. Almost immediately, the turbulence lessened and the instruments stabilized. Back in the scout ship, Lyra noticed a change. The electromagnetic interference is decreasing, she reported, her markings pulsing with cautious optimism. I might be able to reconfigure our communication array now. Jeffrey nodded, sweat beading on his forehead as he reinforced their makeshift barricades. Do it. If we can stabilize the field further, it might buy us the time we need. As Lyra worked on the array, Zorn monitored the approaching fleets. The rogue force is changing formation, he observed. There seems to be some disagreement among their ships. Jeffrey joined him at the console, studying the sensor readings. Could be an opportunity. If they're not unified, they might be more susceptible to negotiation. Suddenly, a new alert flashed across the screen. Zorn's markings flickered with confusion. This can't be right. There's another ship approaching, faster than anything I've ever seen. Before they could investigate further, the door to the command center buckled under a powerful blow. The extremist crew was making its final push to retake the ship. Jeffrey took up a defensive position, his makeshift weapon at the ready. Whatever happens, we need to hold this position. The fate of both our species depends on it. As tension mounted within the scout ship, the research facility on Earth was a hive of activity. Dr. Rodriguez burst into the command center, her eyes bright with excitement. Colonel Blackwood, she called out, holding up a vial of shimmering liquid. We've done it. We've synthesized a large batch of the protein from Gaia's blood. The colonel's eyes widened as he grasped the significance of this breakthrough. Excellent work, Doctor. This could be the key to resolving this conflict peacefully. He turned to address the room. Prepare a diplomatic package immediately. Include all data on the protein's potential, our collaborative research, and a proposal for peaceful resolution. We need to get this information to both fleets as soon as possible. As the team scrambled to assemble the package, Gaia approached the colonel, her expression determined. "Sir, I believe I can craft a message that will resonate with the Zanari High Council. My unique perspective might be what we need to break through." Colonel Blackwood nodded. "Do it, Gaia. We're counting on you." Outside, Earth's defense networks flickered and sputtered under the electromagnetic assault. Military commanders worldwide struggled to maintain cohesion as communication became increasingly unreliable. In orbit, the rogue Zanari fleet continued its advance, now visibly faltering as the second, larger fleet approached. And streaking through it all, the mysterious lone ship drew ever closer, its purpose unknown. As Dr. Gray's aircraft finally came within visual range of the scout ship, the stage was set for a confrontation that would determine the future of human-Zanari relations. The next few hours would test the limits of their newfound alliance and the drive of those fighting to preserve it. As tension mounted within the scout ship, a brilliant flash of light pierced through the viewports, momentarily blinding Jeffrey and his companions. The ship's sensors blared with urgent alerts, signaling the approach of an unidentified vessel moving at unprecedented speeds. "What in the world is that?" Jeffrey exclaimed, shielding his eyes from the intense glare. Before Zorn could respond, a powerful signal cut through the electromagnetic interference, overriding all communication channels. A deep, authoritative voice reverberated through the ship's speakers. "Attention all forces. This is High Counselor Vex of the Zanari High Council. I order an immediate cessation of hostilities." The extremist crew's assault on the command center door abruptly halted. In the sudden silence, Jeffrey, Zorn, and Lyra exchanged bewildered glances. "High Counselor Vex." Zorn's markings pulsed with a mix of awe and disbelief. "The highest-ranking official of our people here?" Lyra quickly verified the signal's authenticity. "It's genuine. This changes everything." At the research facility on Earth, Colonel Blackwood received the transmission simultaneously. He wasted no time in issuing orders to his command staff. "All human forces, stand down immediately. I repeat, cease fire and stand down." He turned to address Ambassador Zorn through the newly stabilized communication link. "Ambassador, I need you to use your authority to halt any aggressive actions from our Zanari allies." Zorn nodded grimly. "Understood, Colonel. I'm transmitting the order now." As the orders rippled through both human and allied Zanari forces, a tense calm settled over the battlefield. The rogue fleet's formation began to waver, confusion evident in their erratic movements. Meanwhile, Dr. Gray's experimental aircraft finally reached the Zanari scout ship. With expert precision, he maneuvered the craft into position above the embattled vessel. "Jeffrey, this is Gray. I'm deploying the electromagnetic dampening field now. Brace yourselves." A shimmering bubble of energy enveloped the scout ship, instantly neutralizing the extremist weapons and communication systems. Seizing the opportunity, Jeffrey sprang into action. "Zorn, Lyra, let's move. We need to secure the ship while they're disoriented." The trio burst out of the command center, quickly subduing the now defenseless extremist crew. Within minutes, they had regained control of the entire vessel. As Lyra worked feverishly to reconfigure the communication array, implementing Gaia's stabilization plan, Jeffrey and Zorn secured the captured extremists in the ship's holding cells. "I never thought I'd see the day when humans and Zanari fought side by side," one of the extremists spat bitterly. Jeffrey regarded him coolly. "Then you've seriously underestimated both our species." Back on Earth, the effects of Lyra's efforts became immediately apparent. The global electromagnetic field began to normalize, and defense systems across the planet flickered back to life. Military commanders breathed sighs of relief as full communication capabilities were restored. In the Research Facilities Command Center, Gaia and Dr. Rodriguez raced against time, compiling all their groundbreaking data on the protein discovery and the successful human-Zanari collaboration. "Colonel," Gaia called out, her eyes bright with tenacity, "we prepared the diplomatic package. It contains everything we've learned, along with proposals for a peaceful resolution." Colonel Blackwood nodded approvingly. "Excellent work. We'll present this to High Counselor Vex as soon as he arrives." As if on cue, a sleek, otherworldly vessel descended through Earth's atmosphere. Its design was unlike anything humans or even their Zanari allies had ever seen, effortlessly cutting through the remnants of the electromagnetic disturbances. On the main view screen, the rogue Zanari fleet's formation continued to deteriorate. Several ships broke away, their captains transmitting hasty messages of surrender and capitulation. "Look at that," Dr. Rodriguez murmured, gesturing to the display. "They're falling apart." Colonel Blackwood's expression remained stern. "It's not over yet. Prepare for the diplomatic summit. Ambassador Zorn, Gaia, you're with me. We need to meet High Counselor Vex immediately." As the colonel's team departed for the secure meeting location, Jeffrey and Dr. Gray worked tirelessly aboard the captured scout ship. They interfaced its advanced systems with Earth's defense network, unlocking a treasure trove of tactical data and technological insights. "This is incredible," Dr. Gray enthused, his fingers flying over the alien controls. "With this integration, we'll be able to predict and counter any move the remaining rogue ships might make." Jeffrey nodded, his military mind already analyzing the strategic implications. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that. But if it does, we'll be ready." As the various factions converged for the upcoming diplomatic summit, a sudden alert blared through the command center. The remaining loyal ships of the rogue fleet had broken formation, accelerating on a direct course for Earth. "They're making a final push," Jeffrey shouted, his hands flying over the controls. "All defense systems, prepare to engage." In that moment, as human and Zanari forces scrambled to mount a unified defense, the true test of their newfound alliance began. The next few minutes would determine not just the outcome of this battle, but the future of both species. Species and our newfound allies hung in the balance. The rogue fleet's final push towards Earth was met with a unified response from the combined human and Zanari forces. Jeffrey's voice crackled over the comms, issuing rapid-fire orders as he coordinated the defense from the captured scout ship. "All units maintain formation, target their propulsion systems and weapons arrays. We need to disable, not destroy." As the battle unfolded in Earth's orbit, a sleek vessel unlike any seen before descended through the atmosphere. Its approach was eerily silent, the air around it shimmering as it manipulated local gravitational fields to land without disturbing the surroundings. At the secure meeting location, Colonel Blackwood, Ambassador Zorn, and Gaia watched in awe as the ship touched down. The vessel's hull seemed to ripple, and a door materialized out of the seamless surface. High Counselor Vex emerged, flanked by a small contingent of Zanari officials. He towered over the human delegation, his skin adorned with intricate, pulsating bioluminescent patterns that seemed to shift with his mood. Colonel Blackwood stepped forward, extending his hand in a human gesture of greeting. "High Counselor Vex, welcome to Earth." Vex regarded the offered hand with curiosity before mimicking the gesture. "Colonel Blackwood, I presume. Your world is intriguing." Gaia approached, holding the diplomatic package. "High Counselor, we prepared this for you. It contains all our research on the protein synthesis and our proposals for cooperation." Vex's patterns flickered with interest as he accepted the package. His eyes, multifaceted and gleaming, scanned the data rapidly. "Fascinating. This could indeed be the solution we've been seeking." As the diplomatic summit began, the battle in orbit reached a fever pitch. Jeffrey, at the helm of the scout ship, led a daring assault on the rogue fleet's flagship. "Dr. Gray, I need more power to the shields." Jeffrey shouted as energy blasts rocked the ship. Gray's fingers danced across the alien controls. "Rerouting power now. Jeffrey, if we can get closer, I might be able to use their own technology against them." Seizing the opportunity, Jeffrey executed a series of complex maneuvers, bringing their ship within meters of the flagship's hull. Gray activated a burst of concentrated electromagnetic energy, precisely targeting the flagship's primary systems. The effect was immediate. The massive ship's weapons fell silent, its engine sputtering out as it drifted powerlessly in space. Back at the research facility, Dr. Rodriguez and Lyra worked feverishly to stabilize Earth's electromagnetic field. Sweat beaded on Rodriguez's forehead as she fine-tuned the equipment. "Lyra, we need to boost the signal strength. Can you reroute power from the auxiliary generators?" Lyra's markings pulsed with concentration. "Initiating power transfer now." "Dr. Rodriguez, look at these readings. The field is stabilizing faster than we anticipated." As their efforts bore fruit, communication channels cleared across the globe. The sounds of battle in orbit became interspersed with confused chatter from the rogue fleet. At the diplomatic summit, High Counselor Vex's demeanor had shifted from cautious to deeply engaged. He looked up from the data package, his patterns now pulsing with a mix of hope and urgency. "Colonel Blackwood, Ambassador Zorn, this research. It's more promising than we dared hope. But you must understand, the crisis facing our people is dire. Our species stands on the brink of extinction." Colonel Blackwood nodded gravely. "We understand the gravity of the situation, High Counselor. That's why we're proposing a joint human-Zanari research initiative to further develop this treatment." Zorn stepped forward, his markings glowing with conviction. "High Counselor, if I may, we have an opportunity here not just to save our species, but to forge a lasting alliance that could benefit both our peoples." Vex considered this, his patterns shifting thoughtfully. "Your proposal is intriguing, but the current conflict presents a significant obstacle." Gaia, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "High Counselor, we may have a solution for that as well." She outlined a plan to use the captured scout ship's communication array to broadcast the protein research data to all Zanari ships in the solar system. Vex's patterns flashed with surprise. A bold strategy, but will it be enough to sway those who have already committed to this misguided course of action? As if in answer to his question, Jeffrey's voice came through on the command center speakers. "Colonel, this is Jeffrey. We've successfully disabled the rogue flagship, requesting permission to initiate the broadcast." Colonel Blackwood looked to Vex, who nodded his assent. "Do it, Jeffrey. Let's end this conflict once and for all." Moments later, the broadcast went out. The effect was almost immediate. Across the battlefield, rogue ships began to power down their weapons. Communication channels flooded with messages of surrender and confusion. High Counselor Vex watched the events unfold on the command center screens, his patterns now glowing with a mix of relief and hope. He turned to Colonel Blackwood, his decision made. "Colonel, I believe we have the beginnings of an agreement. Let us discuss the details of this joint research initiative." As the two leaders began to hash out the specifics of their newfound alliance, Jeffrey's voice came through once more. "Colonel, the rogue fleet has been neutralized. We're beginning recovery operations now." The immediate crisis had been averted, but as the adrenaline of battle faded, the enormity of what lay ahead began to sink in. The challenges of implementing a galaxy-spanning research initiative, integrating two vastly different cultures, and healing the wounds of conflict loomed large. Yet, as Gaia looked around at the humans and Zanari working side by side, she felt a surge of optimism. They had taken the first steps towards a future neither species could have imagined alone. The real work was just beginning beginning. The real work was just starting. In the weeks that followed, the dust of battle settled, and the focus shifted to implementing the joint Human-Zanari Research Initiative. Antarctica, with its pristine isolation, was chosen as the neutral ground for the newly established Interspecies Collaborative Research Center. Jeffrey stood at the window of the ICRC's main laboratory, watching as the last of the construction crews departed. The sleek, dome-shaped facility gleamed against the stark white landscape, a testament to the unprecedented cooperation between humans and Zanari. "Quite a sight, isn't it?" Dr. Rodriguez's voice came from behind him. She approached, her lab coat crisp and her eyes bright with anticipation. Jeffrey nodded, turning to face her. "It's hard to believe how far we've come in such a short time." "And we've only just begun," she replied, gesturing to the bustling activity inside the lab. Human and Zanari scientists moved about in perfect sync, their movements a dance of shared purpose. As the newly appointed human liaison officer for the ICRC, Jeffrey felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. His unique experiences had made him the ideal candidate for this position, bridging the gap between the two species. Across the room, Gaia maneuvered her way through the lab, her movements more fluid than before. The advanced medical technology at the ICRC had allowed her to regain partial mobility in her congenitally deformed leg. She approached Jeffrey and Dr. Rodriguez, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing with excitement. "The first batch of protein samples has arrived," she announced. "Dr. Krell is preparing them for analysis now." Dr. Rodriguez's eyes lit up. "Excellent. Let's join him and get started on the next phase of trials." As they made their way to the analysis chamber, alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. Red lights flashed, casting an eerie glow over the pristine white walls. "What's happening?" Jeffrey shouted over the noise, his military instincts kicking in. A human technician rushed up to them, his face pale. "Sir, we've detected an unauthorized vessel approaching our supply route. It matches the signature of the extremist group that's been targeting our shipments." Jeffrey's eyes sharp. The attacks on ICRC supply lines had been intensifying, threatening to derail their progress. He turned to Gaia and Dr. Rodriguez. "Continue with the analysis. I need to coordinate with Colonel Blackwood's security team." Racing to the command center, Jeffrey found it already a hive of activity. Human and Zanari security personnel worked side by side, their training evident in their synchronized movements. "Status report," Jeffrey barked as he entered. A Zanari officer, his skin patterns flickering with urgency, responded. "The vessel is on an intercept course with our research ship, carrying vital Zanari biological samples. ETA to contact, 15 minutes. Jeffrey's mind raced through possible scenarios. "Contact Colonel Blackwood. We need to deploy the Joint Security Force immediately." As the response team mobilized, Jeffrey turned his attention to the tactical display. The extremist vessel was closing in fast, its intentions clear. "This is more than just a simple attack," he muttered. "They're after the Zanari samples." In the lab, Dr. Rodriguez and Dr. Krell huddled over a microscope, examining the latest protein synthesis results. The alarms had been silenced, but tension hung heavy in the air. "These results are promising," Dr. Krell noted, his multifaceted eyes gleaming. "The modified protein is showing increased stability in Zanari's cellular structures." Dr. Rodriguez nodded, but her brow furrowed. "Yes, but look at the human tissue samples. There's an unexpected reaction occurring." As they delved deeper into the analysis, the implications became clear. The protein treatment, while potentially life-saving for the Zanari, could have harmful side effects in humans. Meanwhile, out on the frigid Antarctic waters, the Joint Human-Zanari Security Force engaged the extremist vessel. The clash was swift and intense, a testament to the newly forged alliance's effectiveness. Jeffrey watched the feed from the command center, his heart racing. The extremists fought with desperation, but they were outmatched by the combined might and technology of the Allied forces. In a daring maneuver, a team of human and Zanari operatives boarded the extremist ship. After a brief but fierce firefight, they secured the vessel and its crew. As the adrenaline of the moment faded, Jeffrey received a transmission from the research ship. Liaison Officer Jeffrey, this is Captain Markov. The Zanari samples are secure. We're proceeding to the ICRC as planned. Jeffrey allowed himself a small sigh of relief. They had won this battle, but he knew the war was just the beginning. The extremist commitment to disrupt their work was a constant threat, one that would require vigilance and unity to overcome. Back in the lab, Dr. Rodriguez and Dr. Krell shared their findings with Gaia. The news of the potential side effects in humans cast a shadow over their earlier optimism. We need to modify the treatment, Dr. Rodriguez stated, her voice firm. We can't risk harming humans in our efforts to save the Zanari. Dr. Krell's skin patterns pulsed with concern. Agreed, but time is of the essence. Our people cannot afford delays. Gaia looked between them, her expression resolute. Then we work harder. We find a solution that works for both species. That's what this alliance is all about. As they set to work on this new challenge, Jeffrey entered the lab. The weariness in his eyes spoke volumes about the security situation. The samples are safe, he reported, but these attacks are escalating. We need to address the root of the problem. Gaia nodded, her patterns shifting thoughtfully. Perhaps it's time we took our message to the public. Show them the true potential of our cooperation. Jeffrey considered this, a plan already forming in his mind. A public outreach program. It's risky, but it might be our best chance at changing hearts and minds. As they discussed the details of this new initiative, a technician burst into the lab, his face flushed with excitement. Dr. Rodriguez, Dr. Krell, you need to see this immediately. They rushed to his workstation, where a display showed a long-range sensor readout. A massive object was visible, its trajectory unmistakable. Is that? Dr. Rodriguez began, her voice trailing off. The technician nodded grimly. An asteroid, and it's on a collision course with Earth. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The challenges they faced had suddenly grown exponentially, but so had the opportunity to prove the worth of their alliance. Jeffrey straightened, his voice steady as he addressed the room. Contact High Counselor Vex and Colonel Blackwood. We need to mobilize every available resource. This asteroid changes everything. The mood in the room shifted instantly from celebration to fierce dedication. The potential extinction event looming on the horizon dwarfed their previous challenges, uniting humans and Zanari in a common cause that transcended their differences. Within hours, the ICRC transformed into the nerve center for what would become known as Operation Celestial Shield. Jeffrey found himself at the heart of the operation, coordinating with Earth space agencies and Zanari technologists to develop a comprehensive plan for intercepting the approaching asteroid. As he pored over astronomical data and propulsion schematics, Jeffrey couldn't help but marvel at the irony. Just weeks ago, the Zanari had been perceived as a threat to Earth's existence. Now, they were essential partners in ensuring humanity's survival. In the lab, Dr. Rodriguez and Dr. Krell redoubled their efforts on the protein research, knowing that their work could prove crucial in the face of this new threat. Days blurred into nights as they refined their formulas, pushing the boundaries of both human and Zanari biochemistry. Their persistence paid off. 3 weeks into the crisis, Dr. Rodriguez burst into Jeffrey's makeshift office, her eyes bright with excitement despite the dark circles beneath them. "We've done it," she announced, her voice hoarse from lack of sleep. "We've successfully modified the treatment to eliminate the harmful side effects in human subjects." Jeffrey leaped to his feet, his exhaustion momentarily forgotten. "That's incredible news, Doctor. How soon can we begin human trials?" "We can start immediately," she replied. "But there's more. The modifications we've made. They have potential applications beyond treating the Zanari condition. We might be looking at a breakthrough in treating human genetic disorders as well." The news spread quickly, igniting a wave of renewed public support for the interspecies alliance. As humanity grappled with the looming asteroid threat, the prospect of medical advancements offered a glimmer of hope for the future. Meanwhile, construction began on a joint human-Zanari space station in Earth's orbit. Dubbed Harmony, the station's modular design incorporated elements from both species' architectural styles. As sections of the station were launched and assembled, it became a visible symbol of cooperation, a bright point of light in the night sky that reminded Earth's inhabitants of their newfound allies. Yet, even as progress was made, new challenges arose. During a critical test of the Zanari propulsion technology intended for the asteroid interception mission, a key component malfunctioned. The failure threatened to delay the mission beyond the narrow window of opportunity. They had to alter the asteroid's course. Jeffrey, drawing on years of military problem-solving experience, proposed an audacious solution. What if we adapt Earth's nuclear propulsion prototypes to work with the Zanari energy systems? He suggested during an emergency meeting with the engineering teams. His proposal sparked intense debate. Some argued that combining untested technologies was too risky, while others saw it as their only viable option, given the time constraints. As the engineers argued, alarms blared through the facility. Colonel Blackwood's voice crackled over the intercom. "Security breach in Sector 7. All personnel, initiate lockdown procedures." Jeffrey raced to the security center, arriving just in time to see the aftermath of the incident on the monitors. A group of human extremists had attempted to sabotage the nuclear propulsion prototypes, fearing their use by alien forces. Thanks to the swift action of the joint Human-Zanari Security Force, the attack was thwarted. But the incident highlighted the ongoing tensions surrounding the alliance. In response, High Counselor Vex made an unprecedented decision. In a global broadcast, he announced that the Zanari would share advanced defensive technology with Earth's governments. "We are all children of the cosmos," Vex declared, his patterns pulsing with sincerity. "And in the face of this threat, we stand united. The technology we offer is a testament to our commitment to Earth's safety and the future we hope to build together." The gesture had a profound impact on public opinion. As engineering teams worked around the clock to integrate the human and Zanari propulsion systems, Gaia found her role in the project expanding. Her unique perspective as a Zanari who had experienced human compassion firsthand proved invaluable in bridging the cultural and technological gaps between the two species. Gaia spent long hours with the human engineers, patiently explaining Zanari energy concepts and helping them adapt these principles to Earth's nuclear technology. Her bioluminescent patterns pulsed with excitement as she watched the two technologies slowly merge into something entirely new. "It's beautiful," she murmured one night, standing before a holographic display of the integrated propulsion system. "A perfect fusion of our two worlds." Jeffrey, who had been working nearby, looked up from his data pad. "It's more than that," he said softly. "It's the key to our survival." As the launch date for Operation Celestial Shield approached, the global media's attention focused intensely on the ICRC and the progress of the mission. Public opinion began to shift as people witnessed the tangible benefits of human-Zanari cooperation. Educational programs launched worldwide, explaining the basics of the asteroid diversion mission and the potential impact of the protein research on human medicine. But just as hope began to grow, a new challenge emerged. Long-range scans revealed that the asteroid's composition was far more complex than initially thought. Its dense metallic core would complicate efforts to alter its trajectory, forcing a last-minute revision of the mission parameters. Recognizing the need for additional expertise, Jeffrey reached out to an old ally. Dr. Samuel Gray, the scientist who had initially helped him and Gaia enter the research facility during their escape, arrived at the ICRC within days of the request. "Looks like you've gotten yourselves into quite a situation," Dr. Gray remarked dryly as he surveyed the bustling command center. "Good thing you called. I got a few ideas that might just save all our hides." As Dr. Gray integrated into the team, bringing fresh insights and innovative approaches to the asteroid problem, the combined human-Zanari crew conducted a series of high-stakes tests on the integrated propulsion system. Initial trials showed promise, but also revealed potential instabilities that could jeopardize the entire mission. Engineers worked tirelessly to refine the system, knowing that failure was not an option. The launch site, a specially constructed facility in the Gobi Desert, became a hive of activity as the mission's launch window approached. The spacecraft, a hybrid of human and Zanari design, stood ready on the launch pad, embodying the hopes and fears of two civilizations. As the final countdown began, Jeffrey stood in the control room, his heart pounding. He glanced at Gaia, who stood beside him, her patterns pulsing with a mix of anxiety and excitement. "Whatever happens," she said softly, "we face this challenge together. That alone is a victory." Jeffrey nodded, his eyes fixed on the main view screen as the engines ignited. The fate of two worlds now rested on the success of their unprecedented collaboration. The hybrid spacecraft stood poised on the launch pad, a testament to the combined ingenuity of two worlds. As the final seconds of the countdown ticked away, an air of tense anticipation filled the control room. Jeffrey's eyes darted between the main view screen and the status readouts, his breath catching in his throat as the moment of truth approached. Suddenly, alarms blared through the facility. Red warning lights flashed across control panels, and the main screen displayed a cascade of error messages. "Abort! Abort!" shouted the launch director, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We have a critical power fluctuation in the propulsion system." The engines, which had been moments away from ignition, fell silent. A collective groan of disappointment and frustration rippled through the control room. Jeffrey sprang into action, his military training kicking in. "Status report now," he barked, moving swiftly between workstations. Dr. Rodriguez's fingers flew over her keyboard as she analyzed the incoming data. "The integrated human-Zanari power systems are experiencing some kind of interference," she reported, her brow furrowed in concentration. "We're seeing energy spikes that weren't present in any of our simulations." Jeffrey nodded, his mind racing. "Dr. Gray, Dr. Krell, I need you on this immediately. Assemble a joint troubleshooting team and find out what's causing this fluctuation." As the scientists hurried to comply, Jeffrey turned to address the rest of the team. "This is a setback, but it's not the end. We've overcome every obstacle thrown our way so far, and we'll overcome this one too." Over the next few hours, the troubleshooting team worked feverishly to identify the source of the problem. Dr. Gray, his experience with Earth's technology proving invaluable, collaborated closely with the Zanari engineers to analyze the complex interplay between the two power systems. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Dr. Gray emerged from the lab, his face a mix of excitement and concern. "We've identified the issue," he announced. "It's the Earth's magnetic field. It's interacting with the Zanari energy systems in a way we didn't anticipate. The unique conditions at this launch site are amplifying the effect." Jeffrey absorbed this information, his mind already racing ahead to potential solutions. "Can we compensate for it?" he asked. Dr. Gray shook his head. "Not in time. We'd need to completely recalibrate the propulsion system, and that would take weeks, maybe months." A heavy silence fell over the room as the implications sank in. The asteroid was rapidly approaching its optimal interception point. Any significant delay could render their efforts futile. Jeffrey paced the control room, his eyes unfocused as he considered their options. Suddenly, he stopped, his gaze snapping to the large display showing the orbital path of the Harmony space station. "What if we move the launch to space?" he asked, his voice quiet but intense. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to him. "The Harmony station," Jeffrey continued, his words coming faster now. "It's not complete, but it's functional. If we can adapt its systems to support the spacecraft, we could launch from there. We'd bypass the interference from Earth's magnetic field entirely." Dr. Rodriguez's eyes widened as she grasped the implications. "It's possible," she said slowly, "but the logistics would be incredibly complex. We'd need to transfer equipment, personnel, reconfigure the station's power grid. And we'd need to do it all in a matter of days," Dr. Gray added, his tone grim but not dismissive. Jeffrey nodded, acknowledging the challenges. "It's risky, but it might be our only option. We need to present this to High Counselor Vex and Colonel Blackwood immediately." Within the hour, an emergency meeting was convened. As Jeffrey laid out his proposal, he could see the mix of skepticism and hope on the faces around him. High Counselor Vex listened intently, his skin patterns shifting in deep thought. When Jeffrey finished, the Zanari leader was silent for a long moment. "What you propose is audacious," Vex said finally. "But these are audacious times. You have my full support, and—" He paused, his patterns pulsing with an intensity Jeffrey had never seen before. "I am prepared to authorize the use of our teleportation technology to expedite the transfer of critical components and personnel to the Harmony station." A ripple of surprise passed through the human members of the assembly. Zanari teleportation technology was something they had only heard whispers about. Colonel Blackwood leaned forward, his expression grave. "Counselor, are you certain? The security implications are substantial," Vex finished for him. "But the stakes demand nothing less than our full commitment and trust in one another." As the meeting adjourned and preparations for the space-based launch began in earnest, Jeffrey felt a mix of anticipation and trepidation. They were about to attempt something unprecedented, with the fate of two worlds hanging in the balance. In the midst of the controlled chaos that followed, alarms once again blared through the facility. Colonel Blackwood's voice came over the intercom, tight with tension. "Security alert. We're detecting a massive cyber attack on our satellite networks. All non-essential systems, initiate lockdown procedures immediately." Jeffrey's heart sank as he realized their challenges were far from finished. As he raced towards the security center, he knew that the next few hours would test the limits of human-Zanari cooperation like never before. The race to save Earth had entered its most critical phase, and failure was not an option. As Jeffrey raced towards the security center, his mind whirled with the implications of the cyber attack. The transition to a space-based launch had already pushed their resources to the limit, and now this new threat threatened to unravel everything they had worked for. He burst into the security center, where Colonel Blackwood was coordinating the response. "Status report," Jeffrey demanded, his eyes scanning the banks of monitors displaying real-time data from their satellite networks. "It's a sophisticated attack," Blackwood replied, his voice tense. "They're targeting our communications satellites and ground stations simultaneously. We're working to isolate and contain the breach, but it's spreading fast." As they spoke, the main view screen flickered to life, showing a live feed from the hybrid spacecraft. Captain Michael Torres' face appeared, his expression grim. "Ground control, we're experiencing communication disruptions. Please advise." Jeffrey stepped forward, keying the microphone. "Captain Torres, we're under cyber attack. Maintain your current trajectory and stand by for further instructions." He turned to Blackwood. "We need to secure a direct link to the ship. Can we use the Zanari communication array?" The colonel nodded, already moving to implement the suggestion. As they worked to establish a secure channel, alarms blared once again. This time, It was Dr. Rodriguez's voice that came over the intercom. "Control room. We have a situation on the Harmony station. Gaia's spacesuit has malfunctioned during her EVA. She's adrift with limited oxygen." Jeffrey's heart leapt into his throat. He keyed the station's frequency. "Gaia, can you hear me?" Her voice came back, calm despite the circumstances. "I read you, Jeffrey. My propulsion system is non-responsive. Oxygen levels at 60% and dropping." "Hang on," Jeffrey replied, his mind racing. He turned to the station's command interface. "Krell, are you there?" The Zanari engineer's voice crackled through. "I am here, Jeffrey. I see Gaia's predicament. We need to use the station's robotic arm to retrieve her. Can you operate it?" "Affirmative," Krell responded. "Initiating retrieval sequence now." On the monitor, Jeffrey watched as the long, articulated arm of the Harmony station began to move. Krell's expert manipulation guided it towards Gaia's drifting form, a delicate dance of precision in the unforgiving vacuum of space. Meanwhile, Captain Torres' voice came through again, this time with a note of urgency. "Ground control, we've detected a dense field of space debris in our path. Request guidance for evasive maneuvers." Jeffrey's fingers flew over the keyboard, pulling up the ship's sensor data. The debris field was extensive, a maze of potentially lethal obstacles. "Captain, we're sending you augmented reality data for navigation. Work with Zara to plot a safe trajectory." As Torres and his Zanari co-pilot began the perilous task of navigating the debris field, Jeffrey's attention was pulled back to the Harmony station. Krell's voice came through, tense with concentration. "The robotic arm is within reach of Gaia, but her oxygen levels are critically low. Standard retrieval procedure may take too long." Without hesitation, Krell made a decision that took Jeffrey's breath away. "I'm going EVA to manually retrieve Gaia." "Krell, wait!" Jeffrey started, but the Zanari was already moving. On the monitor, Jeffrey watched as Krell, tethered to the station, emerged from the airlock and propelled himself towards Gaia. The next few moments were a blur of tension and precise movements. Krell reached Gaia just as her oxygen reserves dipped into the red zone. With careful maneuvering, he secured her to his tether and began the return journey to the airlock. As Gaia was pulled to safety, Jeffrey allowed himself a moment of relief before turning his attention back to the hybrid spacecraft. Torres and Zara were still navigating the treacherous debris field, their movements a testament to the seamless integration of human and Zanari technology. "We're clear of the debris field," Torres reported, his voice steady despite the ordeal. "But we have a new problem. The Zanari energy core is showing signs of instability." Zara's voice joined in, her tones carrying the distinct resonance of Zanari speech. "The core is reacting unexpectedly to Earth's Van Allen radiation belts. We need to recalibrate manually." Jeffrey exchanged a glance with Dr. Gray, who had just entered the control room. "You'll need to work together," Jeffrey advised. "The recalibration requires precise coordination between human and Zanari systems." As Torres and Zara began the delicate process of stabilizing their ship's power source, Colonel Blackwood approached Jeffrey with a grim expression. "We've identified the source of the cyber attack," he said in a low voice. "It's coming from a group of Zanari extremists opposed to the Alliance." Jeffrey's mind raced with the implications. "We need to neutralize this threat without compromising our mission or the Alliance. Assemble a joint human Zanari cybersecurity team immediately." As Blackwood moved to comply, Dr. Rodriguez burst into the control room, her eyes wide with excitement. "Jeffrey, you need to see this," she said, thrusting a tablet into his hands. "Our analysis of the asteroid's composition has revealed something extraordinary." Jeffrey scanned the data, his eyebrows rising as he absorbed the implications. An unknown element with potential for revolutionary energy production, he murmured. This changes everything. He looked up at the main view screen, where the hybrid spacecraft was now visible against the backdrop of the approaching asteroid. The mission had already faced numerous challenges, but now the stakes were even higher. As he watched Torres and Zara guide their ship towards its rendezvous with destiny, Jeffrey knew that the next few hours would determine not just the fate of Earth, but the future of human-Zanari relations and perhaps the course of scientific advancement itself. The asteroid loomed larger on the screen, its surface more volatile and unpredictable than they had anticipated. Jeffrey keyed the ship's comm once more. Captain Torres, Zara, prepare for final approach. But be advised, we may need to expand our mission parameters. Stand by for updated objectives. As the hybrid craft drew closer to its target, Jeffrey couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the cusp of something much bigger than they had ever imagined. The challenges ahead were daunting, but the potential rewards were beyond measure. With a deep breath, he turned to face the assembled team in the control room, ready to lead them into the next phase of this unprecedented endeavor. Mission. With a deep breath, he turned to face the assembled team in the control room, ready to lead them into the next phase of this unprecedented endeavor. Captain Torres, Zara, we're picking up some anomalous readings from the asteroid, Jeffrey said, his voice tense as he studied the incoming data. There appears to be a narrow fissure on its surface. It might lead to an internal chamber. Torres' voice crackled through the comm, tinged with static from the asteroid's interference. Copy that, Control. We're detecting it too. It's barely wide enough for a probe. What are your orders? Jeffrey exchanged glances with Dr. Rodriguez and Dr. Gray. The potential for new discoveries warred with the urgency of their primary mission. After a moment's deliberation, he made his decision. Proceed with caution, but explore if possible. Split your efforts. Captain Torres, focus on deploying the deflection device. Zara, prepare a probe to investigate the fissure. Understood, Torres replied. Initiating deflection protocol now. As Torres maneuvered the hybrid spacecraft into position, Zara's deft manipulations guided a sleek probe towards the asteroid's mysterious opening. The probe's cameras transmitted real-time footage to the eager eyes in mission control. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the control room. Gaia's face appeared on a secondary screen, her expression taut with concern. Ground control, we have a situation. Long-range sensors are picking up a solar flare, much stronger than we anticipated. It could pose a significant threat to both the station and the hybrid craft. Dr. Rodriguez rushed to analyze the incoming data. She's right, she confirmed, her voice tight. This flare could seriously complicate our mission parameters. Before Jeffrey could respond, Torres' voice cut through the tension. Control, we're experiencing some turbulence. The asteroid's surface has become unstable. On the main screen, they watched as a series of micro-impacts peppered the spacecraft's hull. Torres' piloting skills were put to the test as he fought to maintain their position while deploying the deflection device. Stay the course, Captain, Jeffrey urged. How's the probe doing, Zara? Probe has entered the fissure, Zara reported. Her Zanari tones calm despite the chaos. Telemetry is unusual. The chamber appears to be artificial in nature. A hush fell over the control room as the probe's first images appeared on the screen. Smooth, geometrically perfect walls filled the display, defying any natural explanation. My God, Dr. Gray breathed. What are we looking at? Before anyone could speculate further, Colonel Blackwood burst into the room. The cyber attack has been neutralized, he announced. But we've uncovered something disturbing. The extremists may have had prior knowledge of the asteroid. Jeffrey's mind reeled with the implications, but he forced himself to focus on the immediate crisis. We'll deal with that later. Right now, we need to dash. His words were cut short as Zara's voice filled the room, tinged with awe and disbelief. Control, the probe has reached the center of the chamber. There's an artifact here. It's not of human or Zanari origin. The control room erupted into a flurry of activity as the probe scans revealed an object of clearly alien design. Its surface pulsed with an otherworldly energy, interfering with the asteroid's natural composition. Captain Torres, Jeffrey called out. Status on the deflection device? Deployed, but it's not performing as expected, Torres replied, frustration evident in his voice. The asteroid's altered properties are reducing its effectiveness. I'm recalculating now. As Torres worked to adjust their strategy, the predicted solar flare arrived with staggering force. Communications crackled and died, leaving the hybrid spacecraft cut off from Earth at the worst possible moment. In the deafening silence that followed, Jeffrey watched helplessly as the asteroid began to fracture, its unstable core finally giving way under the combined stresses of the deflection attempt and the alien artifact's influence. We need to reestablish communication now, Jeffrey ordered, turning to Dr. Gray. Work with our Zanari colleagues. Find a way to pierce this interference. As the scientists raced against time, Gaia's voice once again filled the control room. Ground control, we have a problem. A large fragment has broken off from the asteroid. It's on a collision course with the station. Jeffrey's heart pounded as he watched the drama unfold on multiple screens. The hybrid spacecraft, struggling to complete its mission amidst a disintegrating asteroid. The Harmony Station, preparing for emergency maneuvers. And here on Earth, a team of humans and Zanari working desperately to reconnect with their comrades in space. In that moment, as multiple crises converged, Jeffrey knew that the next few hours would define not just the fate of their mission, but the future of human and Zanari cooperation. With dogged tenacity, he squared his shoulders and prepared to face the challenges ahead. As the control room erupted into frenzied activity, Jeffrey's mind raced through their options. The disintegrating asteroid, the mysterious alien artifact, and the incoming solar flare all converged to create a perfect storm of crises. Gaia, he called out, his voice cutting through the chaos. Initiate emergency protocols for the station. Prepare for evasive maneuvers. Acknowledged. Ground control. Gaia responded, her voice steady despite the looming threat. Initiating emergency protocols now. On the main screen, Jeffrey watched as the Harmony Station began a series of precise movements, its thrusters firing in controlled bursts. The incoming asteroid fragment loomed ever closer, a dark mass against the star-speckled backdrop of space. Meanwhile, the hybrid spacecraft carrying Torres and Zara disappeared from view as the solar flare's radiation overwhelmed their communication systems. Jeffrey clenched his fists, knowing that the craft's crew was now on their own, facing unimaginable challenges without guidance from mission control. Dr. Gray, Jeffrey turned to the scientist, his voice urgent. We need to reestablish communication with the hybrid craft. Work with our Zanari colleagues. Find a way to pierce this interference. Gray nodded, immediately huddling with a group of human and Zanari scientists. Their fingers flew over keyboards and alien interfaces, a symphony of cooperation as they raced against time. Aboard the hybrid spacecraft, Captain Michael Torres gripped the controls tightly, his squeezing hard with tension. The ship bucked and shuddered as waves of radiation from the solar flare washed over it, causing systems to flicker and fail. Zara, status report. Torres called out, his eyes never leaving the tumultuous view before him. The Zanari pilot's multifaceted eyes darted across her console, reading data in patterns incomprehensible to human perception. Multiple systems failing, she reported, her alien voice calm despite the chaos. Propulsion at 60% life support stable but strained. Communications offline. Torres nodded grimly, quickly prioritizing their objectives in his mind. We need to secure the deflection device, retrieve that probe, and get samples of the unknown element. In that order, can you handle the probe retrieval while I work on the deflection device? Affirmative, Zara responded, her four-fingered hands already manipulating the controls for the ship's robotic arm. As Torres maneuvered the craft towards the deployed deflection device, chunks of the disintegrating asteroid hurtled past them. Each impact against the ship's hull sent tremors through the craft, a constant reminder of their precarious position. The deflection device came into view, a sleek piece of joint human Zanari engineering, now rendered nearly useless by the asteroid's accelerated decay. Torres's hands danced across the controls, making split-second adjustments to compensate for the changed gravitational landscape. "Probe secured," Zara announced, her voice cutting through Torres's concentration. He spared a quick glance to see the ancient Zanari probe, its surface pitted and scarred by centuries in space, now safely stowed in their cargo hold. "Good work," he said, returning his focus to the deflection device. "Prepare for sample collection. This asteroid won't hold together much longer." As Zara readied the collection equipment, Torres completed the recalibration of the deflection device. It was a long shot, given how much the asteroid had already broken up, but it might help mitigate the threat to Earth. Suddenly, a massive chunk of the asteroid broke free, hurtling directly towards their ship. Torres reacted instinctively, pushing the hybrid craft into a series of high-G evasive maneuvers. The ship groaned under the strain, systems blaring warnings as they pushed against their structural limits. "Brace for impact," Torres shouted as a smaller piece of debris, unseen in the chaos, streaked towards them. The projectile struck the ship with a resounding bang, the impact reverberating through the hull. Warning klaxons blared as new alerts flashed across their screens. "Hull breach in Cargo Bay 3, Zara reported, her voice tight with concern. "We're losing atmosphere." Torres's mind raced through their options. They needed to either attempt emergency repairs or begin their return journey immediately. The choice could mean the difference between success and failure, between life and death. Before he could voice a decision, Zara's console lit up with new alerts. "Captain," she said, her alien features contorted in what Torres had learned to recognize as an expression of concern, "long-range sensors are detecting a cluster of smaller asteroids on a collision course with Earth." Torres felt the weight of responsibility settle heavily on his shoulders. They had the deflection device, the probe with its data on the alien artifact, and samples of the unknown element. All of it could be crucial in facing this new threat. "We need to get this information back to Earth," he said, making his decision. "Seal off Cargo Bay 3. We're heading home." As Zara worked to contain the hull breach, Torres plotted their course back to Earth. The hybrid spacecraft turned, its engines flaring to life as it began its perilous journey through the debris field. In the distance, the cluster of asteroids loomed, a new threat born from the chaos they'd unleashed. Torres gripped the controls tightly, knowing that the fate of two civilizations now rested in their hands. "Hold together," he muttered, both to the ship and to himself, as they plunged into the cosmic gauntlet before them. As they plunged into the cosmic gauntlet, the hybrid spacecraft shuddered violently, debris pinging off its hull like hailstones on a tin roof. "Hull integrity at 78% and falling," Zara reported, her multifaceted eyes scanning the readouts. "Cargo Bay 3 is losing pressure rapidly." Torres gritted his teeth, his hands dancing across the controls as he weaved through the asteroid field. "We need to seal it off. We can't risk losing the whole ship." With a few swift commands, Zara initiated the emergency protocols. Bulkheads slammed shut, cutting off the compromised section from the rest of the vessel. The ship's computer chimed, confirming the successful isolation of Cargo Bay 3. "Bay sealed," Zara announced. "But we've lost access to some of the collected samples." Torres nodded grimly. "It's a necessary sacrifice." Our priority is getting back to Earth with what we have." As they pushed on, the debris field began to thin, offering a moment of respite. But their relief was short-lived. The ship's long-range sensors lit up, detecting a new threat looming on the horizon. "Captain," Zara's voice was tense, "I'm picking up a cluster of smaller asteroids on an intercept course with Earth." Torres leaned forward, studying the sensor readings. The swarm of space rocks was spread out, each individual piece too small to trigger standard detection systems, but collectively posing a significant threat. "We need to warn Earth," Torres said, reaching for the communication controls. His fingers froze midair as he remembered their current predicament. Damn it, comms are still down from the solar flare. Zara's hands flew over her console. "I'm attempting to boost our signal strength, but the radiation interference is substantial." As they worked to re-establish contact, the ship's navigation system began to falter. The control panel flickered, numbers and trajectory calculations shifting erratically. "What now?" Torres muttered, fighting to keep the ship steady. Zara's head tilted, a gesture Torres had come to recognize as her processing complex data. "The alien artifact," she said after a moment. "Its energy signature is interfering with our navigation systems." Torres felt a bead of sweat trickle down his temple. They were flying blind, hurtling through space with Earth's fate hanging in the balance. He took a deep breath, centering himself. "All right, we do this the old-fashioned way," he said, disengaging the autopilot. "Zara, I need you to be my eyes. Use the backup instruments and visual cues to guide us." The Zanari nodded, her alien features set in concentration. Together, they began the delicate dance of manual navigation, relying on their combined skills and instincts to thread their way through the hazards of space. As they approached Earth's orbit, the full extent of their situation became clear. Warning lights flashed across the control panel, indicating multiple system failures. "Hull breach has compromised more than we thought," Zara reported. "Our re-entry capabilities are severely limited." Torres ran through their options, each seeming worse than the last. They couldn't risk a standard re-entry procedure. The stress would tear the ship apart. But staying in orbit wasn't an option either, not with their critical cargo and the looming asteroid threat. As if sensing their predicament, a new voice crackled over the comms, breaking through the interference. "Hybrid craft, this is Colonel Blackwood. We're deploying a space tug to assist with your re-entry. Stand by for rendezvous." Torres and Zara exchanged a look of cautious hope. The space tug, a prototype vessel designed for satellite repair, appeared on their sensors, approaching rapidly. But as the tug neared, the alien artifact's energy signature intensified. A localized gravitational anomaly formed between the two ships, threatening to disrupt the delicate docking procedure. "Zara, compensate for the gravitational shift," Torres ordered, his hands tight on the controls. "Space tug, be advised of unusual gravitational fluctuations in our vicinity." The next few minutes were a symphony of precision piloting. Both crews worked in harmony, adjusting their approach vector moment by moment to account for the unpredictable gravitational eddies. With a metallic clang that reverberated through both vessels, the docking clamps engaged. The hybrid craft shuddered, then steadied as the space tug took on some of the structural strain. "Docking successful," Zara confirmed, a note of relief in her alien voice. Torres allowed himself a small smile. They weren't out of danger yet, but they were one step closer to home. As they began their careful descent towards Earth, Torres couldn't help but wonder what awaited them on the ground. The fate of two civilizations rested in their hands, and the real challenges were only just beginning. The hybrid spacecraft shuddered as it entered Earth's atmosphere. The space tug's additional support barely enough to keep the damaged vessel intact. Torres and Zara worked in perfect sync, their hands flying over controls as they guided their precious cargo home. "Brace for impact," Torres called out, his voice steady despite the strain. The ship hit the ground with a bone-jarring thud, skidding across the Nevada desert before finally coming to rest in a cloud of dust and debris. For a moment, all was silent. Then, a flurry of activity erupted around the landing site. Teams of specialized personnel, both human and Zanari, swarmed the area. Their movements were swift and practiced, a testament to the hours of preparation and planning that had preceded this moment. Torres and Zara stumbled from the ship, their legs unsteady after the grueling journey. They were immediately whisked away by medical personnel, leaving behind the craft that had carried them across the void of space. Jeffrey watched the scene unfold from a nearby command center, his heart racing with a mixture of relief and anticipation. As soon as he received word that the extraction process was complete, he sprang into action. "Initiate Project Nexus," he ordered, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "I want every piece of data, every sample, every scrap of information analyzed yesterday." The mobile containment and research facility buzzed with activity as scientists and researchers dove into their work. Dr. Rodriguez, her eyes alight with excitement, carefully examined the samples of the unknown element. "This is incredible," she murmured, her fingers dancing across a holographic display. "The way it interacts with Earth's magnetic field. It's like nothing we've ever seen before." Across the room, Dr. Gray hunched over a complex array of instruments, his brow furrowed in concentration as he studied the alien artifact's energy signature. "The gravitational effects are off the charts," he muttered to himself. "If we can harness this." As the research team delved deeper into their discoveries, news of the mission's success spread like wildfire. Jeffrey found himself fielding calls from world leaders, journalists, and concerned citizens alike. The pressure to release information to the public mounted with each passing hour. In major cities across the globe, crowds gathered in the streets. Some celebrated, waving flags emblazoned with the logos of both human and Zanari space agencies. Others held up signs demanding full disclosure, their faces etched with worry and suspicion. Colonel Blackwood's voice crackled over the secure communication channel. "Jeffrey, we need to get ahead of this. I'm convening an emergency meeting with world leaders and Zanari representatives. We need a unified response, and we need it now." Jeffrey nodded, though he knew Blackwood couldn't see him. "Understood, Colonel. I'll prepare a preliminary report on our findings." As he worked, Jeffrey's mind raced with the implications of their discoveries. The unknown element's potential to revolutionize early warning systems for celestial threats. The alien artifact's gravitational effects and its possible applications in deflection technology. The opportunities were staggering, but so were the risks. In the medical wing, Torres and Zara underwent extensive examinations. Dr. Chun, the lead physician, studied their test results with a furrowed brow. "No immediate health concerns," she reported, "but we'll need to monitor you both closely for any delayed effects from exposure to the artifact's energy signature." Torres nodded, his eyes drifting to the window where he could see the research facility bustling with activity. "How soon can we get back to work?" he asked, his voice tinged with impatience. Dr. Chen smiled wryly. "Always the eager ones, aren't you? Give it a day. We need to make sure you're fully recovered from the mission." As night fell over the Nevada desert, the research facility showed no signs of slowing down. Scientists worked in shifts, poring over data and running simulations. In the artifact containment room, a group of researchers huddled around a monitor, their faces illuminated by its glow. "Do you see that?" one of them asked, pointing to a fluctuating graph. "The energy signature. It's increasing." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The alien artifact, far from being inert, was growing stronger with each passing moment. As this new development unfolded, the weight of responsibility settled heavily on the shoulders of those tasked with unlocking the secrets of the cosmos. Outside, under the star-studded sky, The hybrid spacecraft stood as a silent testament to the new era of human-Zanari cooperation. And within the research facility, the first tentative steps were being taken on a journey that would reshape the future of both species, both civilizations. As those words echoed in Jeffrey's mind, the facility erupted into a flurry of activity. Scientists and researchers moved with purpose, their excitement palpable as they delved into the treasures brought back from space. Dr. Rodriguez's team huddled around a workstation, carefully examining samples of the unknown element. The holographic display flickered with data as they probed its properties. The interaction with Earth's magnetic field is unlike anything we've seen, Dr. Rodriguez murmured, her eyes fixed on the readouts. Let's increase the electromagnetic frequency and see how it reacts. As she adjusted the controls, a sudden surge of energy coursed through the equipment. Alarms blared, and the lights flickered ominously. "Shut it down!" Jeffrey shouted, rushing towards the team. But it was too late. A localized electromagnetic pulse erupted from the experiment, sweeping through the facility. Computers went dark, equipment powered down, and for a moment, the entire complex was plunged into darkness. In the ensuing chaos, backup generators sputtered to life, casting an eerie glow over the panicked faces of the staff. Jeffrey's voice cut through the din, steady and authoritative. "Everyone remain calm. We've trained for this. Follow emergency protocols." As the staff scrambled to assess the damage, a new crisis unfolded. In the artifact containment room, the alien object pulsed with an otherworldly light. Dr. Gray and his team rushed to stabilize it, but the artifact's energy signature continued to climb. Without warning, a brilliant beam of light shot from the artifact, piercing through the facility's roof and into the night sky. The beam illuminated the desert for miles around, a beacon visible across the southwestern United States. Jeffrey's communicator crackled to life with Colonel Blackwood's urgent voice. "Jeffrey, what the hell is going on down there? We're getting reports of a light show visible from space." "Containment breach, Colonel," Jeffrey replied, his voice tense. "I'm initiating emergency protocols and evacuating non-essential personnel." As the evacuation began, Dr. Gray and his team worked feverishly to stabilize the artifact. Sweat beaded on their foreheads as they manipulated controls and adjusted energy fields. "The gravitational anomalies are off the charts," Dr. Gray muttered, his fingers dancing across a touchscreen. "We need to dampen the energy output before it tears a hole in space-time." Outside the facility, chaos reigned. News helicopters circled overhead, their spotlights cutting through the darkness. Social media exploded with eyewitness accounts and shaky video footage of the light beam. In orbit, aboard the Harmony space station, Gaia's sensors detected a growing gravitational anomaly directly above the research facility. Her voice, calm and measured, echoed through the station's communication system. "Attention ground control. I am detecting a significant gravitational disturbance in the upper atmosphere. Transmitting data now." Back on the ground, as the immediate crisis began to stabilize, Dr. Rodriguez made a startling discovery. The element. Its properties are shifting. It's responding to specific electromagnetic frequencies. Her excitement was cut short as Jeffrey's voice boomed over the facility's speakers. "Prepare for an emergency press conference. We need to get ahead of this before speculation runs wild." As Jeffrey and Colonel Blackwood huddled with their teams to craft a statement, a new complication arose. A group calling themselves the Guardians of Terra issued a public demand for the immediate cessation of all research into the artifact and unknown element. Tension mounted as the United Nations convened an emergency session. Representatives from Earth and the Zanari High Council engaged in heated debates about the future of the research program. Amidst the political turmoil, Torres and Zara volunteered for a crucial mission. They would lead a team to investigate the impact site of one of the larger asteroid fragments that had survived atmospheric entry. As they prepared for their expedition, Dr. Gray's work on the gravitational manipulation device yielded an unexpected breakthrough. During a routine test, a small, stable wormhole flickered into existence in the laboratory. "It's only a few molecules wide," Dr. Gray explained, his voice filled with awe. "But this changes everything." The excitement was short-lived. The wormhole experiment triggered another surge in the artifact's energy output, overloading the facility's power grid. As systems crashed, a series of coded pulses emanated from the artifact. "It's trying to communicate," Dr. Gray whispered, staring at the readouts in disbelief. Before they could begin to decipher the message, Jeffrey received an urgent transmission from a deep space monitoring station. An unidentified object was approaching the solar system at impossible speeds, set to reach Earth's orbit within days. Colonel Blackwood's face was grim as he initiated a global defense readiness protocol. "We're looking at a potential first contact scenario, or an invasion." The Zanari High Council proposed activating a dormant defense network in their home system, offering to share the technology with Earth. The proposal was met with skepticism from human leaders, wary of becoming overly dependent on alien technology. As the facility buzzed with activity, Torres and Zara's team prepared to depart for the asteroid impact site. They loaded specialized equipment designed to detect traces of the unknown element and potential alien technology. "We'll find answers out there," Torres said, his eyes meeting Zara's. "Whatever's coming, we'll face it together." As their vehicle rumbled across the desert, the night sky above them pulsed with an otherworldly light. The unknown object drew closer, bringing with it the promise of revelation, or destruction, or catastrophe. The team's vehicle disappeared into the darkness, leaving behind a facility still reeling from recent events. As the dust settled from the evacuation, Jeffrey issued the all-clear for essential personnel to return. The facility hummed back to life, a hive of focused activity under the watchful eyes of newly reinforced security teams. Dr. Rodriguez's lab was a flurry of controlled chaos as her team reassembled their equipment. Technicians carefully calibrated a massive electromagnetic chamber, its gleaming surfaces reflecting the willpower on their faces. "Initiate containment protocols," Dr. Rodriguez commanded, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "We're going to recreate the element's interaction with Earth's magnetic field, but this time, we control the variables." As the chamber powered up, a low hum filled the room. The unknown element, secured within a reinforced container, pulsed with an otherworldly light. Dr. Rodriguez's fingers danced across a control panel, fine-tuning the electromagnetic field. "Increasing power to 30%, she announced. The element's glow intensified, and for a heart-stopping moment, the equipment flickered. But the safeguards held, and data began pouring across their screens. In another wing of the facility, Dr. Gray hunched over a bank of computers, surrounded by a diverse team of experts. Linguists debated the nuances of alien syntax, while cryptographers ran complex algorithms, all trying to decipher the artifact's mysterious pulses. "We've isolated a repeating pattern," a young cryptographer exclaimed, pointing to a series of peaks on her monitor. "It's not a language as we understand it, but there's definitely structure here." Dr. Gray nodded, his eyes never leaving his own screen. "Cross-reference it with known astronomical data. If this is a message, it might be pointing somewhere." As the team worked, a sudden exclamation broke the focused silence. "Coordinates," a linguist breathed, his eyes wide. "These patterns. They're coordinates within our solar system." The revelation sent shockwaves through the facility. Jeffrey, upon receiving the news, immediately opened a secure channel to the Deep Space Monitoring Station. "I need an immediate comparison between these coordinates and the trajectory of our incoming visitor," he ordered, his voice taut with urgency. The response came swiftly, and with it, a chill that ran through every person in the command center. The unidentified object was on a direct course for the location specified by the artifact. Colonel Blackwood's face appeared on the main screen, his expression grim. "I'm expanding our defense protocol. We're repositioning military satellites and activating our orbital platforms." As Blackwood spoke, technicians around the world sprang into action. Dormant weapon systems hummed to life, their activation sending ripples of unease through diplomatic channels. High above the Earth, aboard the Harmony space station, Gaia's artificial intelligence processed a torrent of data. Her calm voice belied the gravity of her findings as she addressed the station's crew. "The gravitational anomaly is expanding. Its properties match those observed in Dr. Gray's wormhole experiment, suggesting a correlation between the artifact's energy pulses and large-scale space-time distortion." Back on Earth, the United Nations emergency session reached a fevered pitch. After hours of heated debate, a consensus emerged. A multinational oversight committee would be established, granted unprecedented authority over all research related to the alien technology. As these political machinations unfolded, Torres and Zara's team arrived at the asteroid impact site. The desert night was alive with activity as they deployed their sensor array, the equipment casting long shadows in the pale moonlight. "We've got readings," Zara called out, her voice crackling over the team's comm system. "Trace amounts of the unknown element, scattered throughout the impact zone." Torres nodded, his flashlight beam sweeping across the crater's edge. Suddenly, he froze. "Over here. I've got something." The team converged on his position, carefully excavating a small, metallic sphere partially buried in the rocky soil. Its surface bore markings eerily similar to those on the alien artifact. "Package it up," Torres ordered. "We need to get this back to the facility ASAP." As Torres's team made their discovery, Dr. Gray's lab erupted in cheers. On a raised platform in the center of the room, a tiny pinprick of light hovered in midair, a stable wormhole no larger than a pinhead, but representing a quantum leap in human scientific achievement. The elation was short-lived. Alarms blared throughout the facility as the artifact's energy output spiked once again. Above the building, the air shimmered and distorted, like heat waves on a scorching day. Scientists rushed to contain the phenomenon, but their efforts seemed futile in the face of forces they barely understood. As they struggled, news arrived of the Zanari fleet entering the solar system, their ships already experiencing navigational difficulties due to the expanding gravitational anomaly. Jeffrey's voice cut through the chaos, calling for an emergency meeting. As key personnel gathered, the unidentified object accelerated, now on a collision course with Earth far sooner than anyone had anticipated. In the conference room, faces etched with worry turned to Jeffrey. The weight of the moment hung heavy in the air as he prepared to address the assembled leaders. Whatever decisions they made in the next few minutes would shape the future of both humanity and their Zanari allies. And all the while, the mysterious object drew ever closer, bringing with it the potential for either salvation or destruction. Catastrophe. The tension in the conference room was palpable as Jeffrey opened his mouth to speak. Suddenly, the lights flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness. Emergency generators kicked in, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. Jeffrey's communicator crackled to life, Dr. Rodriguez's voice barely audible over a cacophony of alarms. "Jeffrey, the artifact's energy output is off the charts. We can't contain it." Before he could respond, the floor beneath them shuddered. Through the reinforced windows, they watched in horror as the air above the facility distorted, shimmering like a heat mirage gone mad. The anomaly expanded rapidly, engulfing the surrounding area in a translucent dome of writhing energy. "Evacuation Protocol Alpha," Jeffrey barked, his voice cutting through the chaos. "All non-essential personnel, get out now." The conference room emptied in seconds as people rushed to escape. Jeffrey sprinted towards the artifact containment area, dodging panicked staff and falling debris. He burst into Dr. Rodriguez's lab, just as a brilliant flash of light forced him to shield his eyes. When his vision cleared, Jeffrey's jaw dropped. The unknown element samples had broken free of their containment units and were now swirling in a mesmerizing vortex of energy at the center of the room. Equipment, chairs, and even smaller instruments were being pulled into its growing gravitational field. "Elena!" Jeffrey shouted, spotting Dr. Rodriguez clinging to a bolted-down console. "We need to shut it down." "We can't!" she yelled back, her fist clenched as she fought against the pull. "It's feeding off itself now. The more we try to contain it, the stronger it gets." A deafening crack echoed through the facility as the artifact's energy field expanded further, engulfing entire wings of the complex. Jeffrey felt a strange sensation wash over him, as if gravity itself was becoming uncertain. He watched in disbelief as a senior technician lost his grip and floated helplessly towards the ceiling. "This is Jeffrey to all personnel," he shouted into his communicator. "Full evacuation. I repeat, full evacuation of the entire facility." High above, aboard the Harmony space station, alarms blared as systems struggled to compensate for the rapidly shifting gravitational landscape below. Gaia's normally placid voice took on an urgent tone. "Warning. Gravitational anomaly expanding exponentially. Station orbit destabilizing. Initiating emergency protocols." The crew watched in awe as the anomaly's effects became visible from space. Shimmering ribbons of light danced across the Earth's surface, auroras unlike anything ever recorded. Back on the ground, Torres and Zar's team fought to keep their aircraft stable as they approached the Nevada facility. The metallic sphere they had recovered from the impact site hummed ominously, vibrating in sync with the pulsations from the distant artifact. "We're losing control," the pilot shouted, wrestling with the stick as warning lights flooded the cockpit. "Instruments are going haywire." Torres gripped his seat, fingers tightening. "Set us down anywhere. We need to get this sphere to the facility." As they made an emergency landing at a nearby airfield, the sky lit up with an otherworldly glow. The unidentified object had entered Earth's atmosphere, its trajectory erratic as it plummeted towards the Nevada desert. Colonel Blackwood's face appeared on screens across the globe, his expression grim. "Initiating orbital defense platforms. All nations on high alert. This is not a drill." But as the platforms powered up, chaos ensued. Energy beams fired wildly into space, missing their target entirely. Others shut down, their systems overloaded by the gravitational distortions. In Earth orbit, the Zanari fleet engaged their advanced shields and weapons, closing in on the descending object. But their technology proved ineffective against its strange properties. Several Zanari ships spun out of control, caught in the expanding gravitational eddies. At the Nevada facility, Dr. Gray watched in a mixture of terror and fascination as his pinhead-sized wormhole experiment underwent a startling transformation. The tiny tear in space-time began to expand, feeding off the artifact's energy. "It's growing exponentially," he shouted to no one in particular, his eyes fixed on the swirling vortex of light and matter. At this rate, it could swallow the entire complex. Jeffrey, having overseen the evacuation of the main building, now stood at the perimeter with a team of engineers. They worked feverishly to set up a ring of experimental containment field emitters based on modified Zanari technology. "Power up the field," Jeffrey ordered, his voice hoarse from shouting over the din of alarms and the low, ominous hum that now permeated the air. The emitters crackled to life, projecting a shimmering dome of energy around the facility. For a moment, it seemed to hold, pushing back against the expanding anomaly. But their relief was short-lived. The unidentified object, now a blazing fireball, breached the lower atmosphere. Its trajectory brought it on a direct course towards the Nevada facility, the combined mass and velocity promising devastation upon impact. Torres and Zara's team raced towards the facility in a commandeered vehicle, the recovered metallic sphere secured in the back. As they approached, the sphere's surface began to crack, revealing a core of pulsating energy that matched the rhythm of the distant artifact. "It's responding to the artifact," Zara shouted, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement. The containment field flickered and strained as the unidentified object drew closer. Jeffrey watched the sky, his heart pounding, knowing that the next few moments would determine the fate of not just the facility, but potentially the entire planet. As the object entered the final seconds of its descent, the artifact's energy reached a fever pitch. The air crackled with power, reality itself seeming to warp and bend around the facility. The containment field pulsed erratically, struggling to hold back the tide of unknown forces converging on this single point in the Nevada desert. In that moment, with the world holding its breath, the unidentified object prepared to make impact, its fiery form illuminating the night sky like a second sun. The outcome of this extraordinary convergence hung in the balance, poised to reshape humanity's understanding of the universe, or bring about its end. Destruction. The world seemed to hold its breath as the fiery object plummeted towards the Nevada facility, its impact imminent and seemingly unavoidable. But in that critical moment, the impossible happened. The containment field, which had been flickering and straining against the onslaught of unknown forces, suddenly surged with newfound strength. The experimental Zanari technology, pushed to its limits, unexpectedly synchronized with the alien artifact's energy signature. A brilliant flash of light erupted from the emitters, and the shimmering dome expanded, solidifying into an impenetrable barrier that enveloped the entire research complex. Jeffrey shielded his eyes from the intense glare, his heart pounding in his chest. As his vision cleared, he gasped in astonishment. The descending object, mere seconds from impact, had come to an abrupt halt. Its blazing surface cooled rapidly, fading from white-hot to a dull, burnished red. "My God!" Jeffrey breathed, his eyes wide with wonder and disbelief. The object, now clearly visible, revealed itself to be a massive spherical craft of alien design. It hovered silently above the containment field, its surface rippling and shifting like liquid metal. The craft adjusted its position with fluid grace, compensating for the gravitational distortions that still plagued the area. At the facility's perimeter, Torres and Zara skidded to a halt in their commandeered vehicle. They leaped out, the recovered metallic sphere secured in a containment case. As they watched the hovering craft with a mixture of awe and trepidation, the sphere in their possession began to vibrate violently. "Torres!" Zara shouted, her eyes fixed on the case. "Something's happening!" Before either of them could react, the sphere burst from its confinement. It shot upward with incredible speed, passing through the containment field as if it were nothing more than mist. The sphere streaked towards the alien craft, which responded by opening a small portal on its underside. As the sphere disappeared into the craft, a visible shockwave of energy exploded outward. The air crackled with power, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the chaos subsided. The gravitational anomalies that had wreaked havoc on the surrounding area vanished, leaving an eerie calm in their wake. Inside the facility, Dr. Rodriguez watched in amazement as the swirling vortex of unknown element in her lab began to change. The chaotic maelstrom of energy and matter coalesced, forming a solid, crystalline structure that pulsed with an inner light. "Incredible!" she whispered, cautiously approaching the newly formed object. Outside, the shimmering distortion above the facility contracted, forming a narrow column of energy that connected the artifact to the hovering craft. The night sky, previously alive with auroras and gravitational distortions, cleared to reveal a canopy of stars. Jeffrey, having retreated to a secure command center, quickly assessed the situation. He activated his comm link, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "This is Jeffrey to all teams. The immediate threat appears to have passed, but we're far from out of the woods. I want a full status report from all departments and prep a team for potential first contact." As the facility buzzed with activity, Colonel Blackwood's face appeared on a nearby screen. "Jeffrey, we're seeing similar phenomena worldwide. Crafts matching the one at your location have appeared at other impact sites. I've ordered a stand-down of offensive measures, but we're maintaining a defensive perimeter." Jeffrey nodded, his mind racing with the implications. "Understood, Colonel. We'll proceed with caution." He quickly assembled a team of human and Zanari scientists, led by Dr. Gray. As they approached the edge of the containment field, the alien craft lowered itself to ground level. Its surface rippled once more, forming what appeared to be an entrance. Dr. Gray turned to Jeffrey, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "This is it, Jeffrey. First contact. Are you sure you want to proceed?" Jeffrey's gaze remained fixed on the craft. "We don't have a choice. Whatever's happening here, it's bigger than any of us. We need answers." As the team prepared to move forward, Jeffrey's comm link crackled to life. Gaia's voice, tinged with an uncharacteristic urgency, filled the air. "Priority message for ground team. Analysis of Harmony Station data reveals crucial information. Energy signatures and gravitational anomalies match ancient Zanari records of a race known as the Precursors. Proceed with extreme caution." The team exchanged glances, the weight of this revelation settling over them. Jeffrey took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. "All right, people, this is the moment we've been preparing for. Dr. Rodriguez, bring that crystalline structure. Torres Zara, you're with us. We're going to make history." As they stepped through the containment field, the craft's surface rippled once more. A solid walkway materialized, leading directly to the entrance. The team paused at the base of the ramp, each member acutely aware of the monumental nature of their next steps. Jeffrey looked at each of his companions in turn, seeing his own mix of fear and grit reflected in their eyes. Without a word, he nodded and took the first step onto the alien surface. The others followed close behind, their footsteps echoing in the eerie silence that had fallen over the Nevada desert. As they approached the entrance, the craft's surface began to pulse with a soft, rhythmic light. The team hesitated, unsure of what to expect. Then, with a sound like a gentle sigh, the entrance dilated open, revealing a corridor that stretched into the depths of the alien vessel. Jeffrey squared his shoulders and moved forward, leading his team into the unknown. As they crossed the threshold, the entrance sealed behind them, cutting off their view of the outside world. They found themselves in a curved passageway, its walls shimmering with the same liquid metal appearance as the craft's exterior. Dr. Gray ran his hand along the wall, his scientific curiosity momentarily overriding his caution. "Fascinating," he murmured. "It's cool to the touch, yet it seems to be in constant motion." As they ventured deeper into the craft, the corridor opened up into a vast chamber. The team gasped in unison as they took in the sight before them. In the center of the room stood a towering pillar of light, pulsating with energy. Surrounding it were what appeared to be control consoles, their surfaces alive with holographic displays. Dr. Rodriguez stepped forward, the crystalline structure in her hands beginning to glow in response to the energy pillar. "It's reacting to something in here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Suddenly, the holographic displays flared to life, filling the chamber with a dazzling array of lights and symbols. The team watched in awe as the alien script began to shift and change, gradually resolving into recognizable Earth languages. A resonant voice, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, filled the chamber. "Welcome, children of Earth and Xener. We have awaited this moment for eons. Jeffrey stepped forward, his heart racing but his voice steady. "Who are you?" he asked, addressing the voice directly. The energy pillar pulsed brightly, and a figure began to take shape within its light. As the team watched, transfixed, the figure solidified into a form that was neither human nor Zanari, yet somehow reminiscent of both. "We are the precursors," the figure replied, its voice resonating through the chamber. "And we have returned to guide you through the next stage of your evolution." The team exchanged glances, a mixture of excitement and apprehension on their faces. They stood on the precipice of a new era, one that promised to reshape their understanding of the universe and their place within it. As the precursor began to speak again, Jeffrey and his team listened intently, knowing that every word could hold the key to humanity's future. As the precursor began to speak again, Jeffrey and his team listened intently, knowing that every word could hold the key to humanity's understanding of the universe. Suddenly, the chamber around them began to shift and reconfigure. The walls rippled like liquid metal, forming new structures and pathways. The team found themselves standing on a solid walkway that extended towards the entrance of the craft. "It appears our presence is requested elsewhere," Dr. Gray observed, his scientific curiosity piqued by the ship's transformative abilities. Jeffrey nodded, his expression a mixture of persistence and caution. "Let's proceed carefully. We don't know what we're walking into." As they approached the entrance, it dilated open, revealing the dimly lit interior of the craft. Torres took point, his military training evident in his measured steps and vigilant gaze. Zara followed close behind, her hand hovering near her handheld scanner. Dr. Gray and Dr. Rodriguez brought up the rear, their eyes darting around, taking in every detail of their extraordinary surroundings. Jeffrey remained outside, activating his comm link to maintain contact with the ground team. "Teams entering the craft now," he reported, his voice steady despite the tension in his shoulders. "Stand by for updates." As the team stepped inside, they found themselves in a circular chamber bathed in a soft, pulsating bioluminescent light. The air felt different, crisp and invigorating, with a noticeably higher oxygen content than Earth's atmosphere. Dr. Rodriguez took a deep breath, her eyes widening. "The oxygen levels here. It's like breathing at high altitude, but without the thinness of the air." Before anyone could respond, a holographic display materialized in the center of the chamber. It projected a three-dimensional map of the galaxy, its complexity and scale leaving the team momentarily awestruck. Dr. Gray approached the hologram, his eyes narrowing as he studied it intently. "Look at this," he said, pointing to several highlighted points on the map. "These correspond to the locations of the other crafts around Earth." As if responding to his observation, the map zoomed in on Earth's solar system. A network of glowing energy lines appeared, connecting the various craft locations in an intricate web. Meanwhile, Dr. Rodriguez had been scanning their surroundings with her handheld device. "The concentrations of the unknown element here are off the charts," she reported, her voice filled with excitement. I think the entire ship might be composed of a more advanced form of the programmable matter we encountered in the lab." To test her theory, she carefully placed a small sample of the crystalline structure they had brought from the facility onto a nearby surface. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. The sample seemed to melt into the ship's wall, causing a ripple effect that spread throughout the chamber. The walls began to shift and reconfigure, forming new patterns and structures before their eyes. Additional holographic displays sprang to life around them, showing complex mathematical equations and diagrams. Zara's eyes lit up with recognition. "These symbols," she said, gesturing to the equations, "they're similar to those found in ancient precursor ruins." She quickly began inputting a series of commands into her handheld device, attempting to establish a rudimentary form of communication with the ship systems. As Zara worked, Torres explored the perimeter of the chamber, His trained eye spotted a series of alcoves that had been hidden moments before. "Over here," he called out, his voice echoing in the chamber. "I've found something." The team gathered around Torres, their eyes widening as they took in the sight before them. Each alcove contained what appeared to be a stasis pod, similar in design to the metallic sphere they had recovered from the asteroid impact site. Most of the pods were empty, but one at the far end of the chamber held a humanoid figure. Before they could investigate further, the ship's internal systems suddenly activated. The central hologram expanded rapidly, engulfing the entire chamber in a swirling mass of stars and energy patterns. The team found themselves suspended in what appeared to be a three-dimensional representation of the galaxy, with Earth and its solar system at the center. "Incredible," Dr. Gray breathed, reaching out to touch a nearby star, his hand passing through the holographic projection. Their attention was quickly drawn back to the occupied stasis pod as it began to open, its surface rippling and retracting. The humanoid figure inside stirred, showing signs of life. As the pod fully opened, the being inside sat up, revealing itself to be unlike anything they had ever seen before. The creature was vaguely reptilian in appearance, with iridescent scales that shimmered in the soft light of the chamber. Its large, multifaceted eyes surveyed the team, seeming to peer into their very souls. When its gaze fell upon Zara, it lingered, as if recognizing something familiar. The being raised a hand, causing the galactic hologram to shift and focus on a specific region of space. This area appeared to be experiencing severe gravitational distortions, far more intense than those observed around Earth. Dr. Rodriguez gasped, her eyes wide as she took in the implications of what they were seeing. Those distortions. They're massive, if they were to reach our solar system. Her words were cut short as the ship's energy output suddenly spiked. The team felt a vibration beneath their feet, and the holographic displays flickered momentarily. Outside the craft, Jeffrey and the ground team observed a sudden increase in energy readings. The containment field surrounding the facility began to fluctuate wildly, struggling to maintain its integrity. The alien artifact inside the research complex pulsed in sync with these fluctuations, its energy output reaching unprecedented levels. Jeffrey's comm link crackled to life, Gaia's voice filled with urgency. "Priority alert. Harmony Station reports massive surge in gravitational anomaly. Anomaly expanding rapidly, effects reaching beyond Earth's immediate vicinity. Zanari fleet moving to defensive positions." Inside the craft, the team exchanged worried glances. The awakened being seemed poised to reveal crucial information, but the rapidly expanding anomaly threatened to destabilize the entire region of space around Earth. Dr. Gray turned to the reptilian being, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and desperation. "Please, we need to understand what's happening. Our world, our entire solar system could be at risk." The being's multifaceted eyes seemed to focus, truly seeing the team for the first time. It opened its mouth to speak, the fate of Earth hanging on its next words. Words. Its multifaceted eyes seemed to flicker with recognition and understanding. The being's scaled hand reached out, not towards the team, but towards the central area of the chamber. In an instant, the floor beneath them rippled and reshaped, forming a raised platform with a complex console at its center. The precursor moved with fluid grace, its iridescent scales shimmering as it approached the newly formed control system. Dr. Gray stepped forward, his scientific curiosity overriding his caution. "Fascinating," he breathed, watching as the being's hands danced over the holographic interface. The galactic map before them shifted once more, zooming in on Earth with startling clarity. A network of glowing lines appeared, connecting the various landing sites of the precursor crafts around the globe. As the team watched, transfixed, these lines began to pulse with energy, creating a web-like pattern that encircled the planet. Outside the craft, Jeffrey's comm link crackled to life. "Sir, you need to see this. came the urgent voice of one of the ground team members. Jeffrey turned his attention away from the craft, his eyes widening as he took in the scene before him. The containment field surrounding the Nevada facility, which had been fluctuating wildly moments before, suddenly stabilized. Its energy output harmonized with the alien artifact inside, creating a steady, pulsating glow that matched the rhythm of the precursor craft. Jeffrey's comm link buzzed again, this time with a message from Gaia. Harmony Station reporting in. The gravitational anomalies affecting Earth's orbit are dissipating. We're regaining full control of our systems. Inside the craft, Dr. Rodriguez noticed her sample of the unknown crystalline element beginning to change. It grew and reshaped itself, forming a complex, three-dimensional structure that mirrored the energy web now surrounding Earth. The precursor being gestured towards this miniature representation, causing it to levitate and seamlessly integrate with the ship's central console. Torres, ever vigilant, noticed movement along the chamber's perimeter. The stasis pods they had discovered earlier were activating, their surfaces rippling as they prepared to open. One by one, more precursor beings emerged, each in varying states of consciousness. As these new entities joined their awakened companion at the central console, the ship's energy output intensified. The holographic displays flickered and expanded, flooding Dr. Gray's handheld devices with an overwhelming amount of data. "This is incredible," Dr. Gray exclaimed, his fingers flying over his device's interface. "It's a mix of advanced scientific knowledge, historical records, and... Wait, there's something else here. It looks like a warning." Zara stepped closer, her eyes scanning the symbols that flashed across the screens. Drawing on her understanding of precursor language, she began to decipher the message. Her expression grew grave as the meaning became clear. "The gravitational anomalies we've been experiencing," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "They're just the beginning. There's a cosmic storm approaching, one that threatens to destabilize large portions of the galaxy." As if in response to Zara's words, the precursor beings projected a new hologram. This image showed Earth at the center of a vast network of energy conduits, extending far beyond the solar system. The planet pulsed with a bright light, marking it as a crucial node in what appeared to be a galaxy-wide defense system. Outside the craft, the effects of this activation became immediately apparent. The unknown element found in the asteroid fragments began to resonate with the energy web, growing and spreading rapidly across the planet's surface. This growth formed a protective lattice that strengthened Earth's magnetic field and stabilized its gravitational interaction with the rest of the solar system. Jeffrey watched in awe as crystalline structures sprouted from the desert floor, pulsing with the same energy that now encircled the planet. His comm link buzzed continuously with reports from around the world, each describing similar phenomena at other precursor landing sites. In orbit, the Harmony Station sensors detected a significant reduction in cosmic radiation levels bombarding Earth. The Zanari fleet, initially poised for defensive action, now moved to assist in the stabilization process, their ships interfacing with the energy web to fine-tune the protective field's parameters. Back inside the craft, the lead precursor being turned its attention to the research team. It approached Torres, extending a hand-like appendage in what was unmistakably a gesture of partnership. The message was clear. The precursors were offering not just protection, but an alliance in the face of the approaching cosmic threat. As the implications of this offer sank in, the ship's interior began to reconfigure once more. A pathway formed, leading towards the exit and lined with holographic displays. These screens showed glimpses of other worlds and civilizations, hinting at the vast network of which Earth was now a part. The team exchanged glances, each member acutely aware of the monumental nature of what they had just witnessed. With a nod from Dr. Gray, they began to move towards the exit, prepared to report their findings to Jeffrey and the global leadership. As they stepped out of the craft, they found themselves in a transformed landscape. The Nevada desert, once barren and unyielding, now bristled with intricate crystalline structures that pulsed with energy. The research facility, which had teetered on the brink of destruction, stood as a gleaming beacon of the new Human-Zanari Precursor Alliance. Jeffrey approached the team, his expression a mix of awe and willpower. "Report," he said simply, his eyes scanning each team member's face for clues about what had transpired inside the craft. Dr. Gray stepped forward, his voice steady despite the excitement evident in his eyes. "Sir, we've made contact with the precursors, and it seems Earth has just become part of something much bigger than we ever imagined." As Jeffrey absorbed this information, the team knew that their work was not nearly finished. The cosmic storm was still approaching, and Earth's new role in galactic affairs would bring challenges they had yet to fathom. But for now, they stood united, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Ahead, the cosmic storm loomed on the horizon, an unseen threat that would test their newfound alliance and the technology that now protected their world. As the team stepped out of the facility, they were momentarily stunned by the transformation that had taken place. The once barren Nevada desert now sparkled with an otherworldly beauty. Crystalline structures, pulsing with energy, stretched as far as the eye could see, forming intricate patterns across the landscape. Torres let out a low whistle. "It's like nothing I've ever seen before," he said, his voice filled with awe. Dr. Rodriguez knelt down, examining one of the nearest crystalline formations. Its surface shimmered with an iridescent glow, reminiscent of the precursor being's scales. She carefully extracted a sample, her scientific curiosity overriding her initial shock. "We need to get this back to the lab immediately," she said, her eyes gleaming with excitement. The implications of this transformation are staggering. As they made their way back to the research facility, Zara noticed that the air seemed cleaner, crisper. She took a deep breath, savoring the unexpected freshness. "Does anyone else notice the change in air quality?" she asked, looking around at her teammates. Dr. Gray nodded, his handheld device already scanning their surroundings. "It's not just your imagination, Zara. These crystalline structures appear to be actively purifying the air and soil around them. It's as if they're repairing the environmental damage we've caused over the years." As they approached the facility, they saw Jeffrey standing at the entrance, his face a mixture of concern and amazement. He waved them over, his posture tense with urgency. "Glad to see you all made it back safely," Jeffrey said as they gathered around him. "We've got reports coming in from all over the world. Similar transformations are occurring at every impact site. The unknown element is spreading rapidly, integrating itself into Earth's ecosystems." Dr. Rodriguez's eyes widened. "We need to set up a lab immediately. If what we're seeing here is happening globally, we need to understand the full scope of these changes." Jeffrey nodded, leading them into the facility. "I've already had a temporary lab set up for you, Doctor. You'll have full access to all our resources." As they entered, they were greeted by a flurry of activity. Scientists and technicians rushed back and forth, their faces a mix of excitement and apprehension. Holographic displays filled the air, showing real-time data from around the world. Dr. Gray immediately made his way to a group of engineers huddled around a complex array of equipment. "We need to start modifying our existing technologies to interface with these new precursor systems," he called out, already immersing himself in the work. Zara found herself drawn to a communications hub, where linguists and xenobiologists were frantically working to decipher the flood of new data. She joined them, her unique understanding of precursor language proving invaluable as they worked to develop a more comprehensive translation system. Torres, feeling slightly out of place amidst the scientific fervor, approached Jeffrey. "Sir, what can I do to help?" he asked, his hand unconsciously moving to the strange new implant at the base of his skull. Jeffrey studied Torres for a moment, noting the subtle changes in his demeanor since the procedure. "Torres, I need you to work with Dr. Gray. Your new connection to the precursor technology could be crucial in adapting our systems. As Torres nodded and moved to join Dr. Gray, Jeffrey's comm link buzzed. He activated it, and Gaia's voice filled the air. "Jeffrey, we're seeing significant changes up here on Harmony Station. The precursor technology is integrating with our systems, enhancing our monitoring capabilities exponentially." "Understood, Gaia," Jeffrey replied. "Keep me updated on any new developments. We need to stay ahead of this transformation as much as possible." As the day wore on, the team worked tirelessly to understand and adapt to the rapidly changing world around them. Dr. Rodriguez's analysis of the crystalline samples revealed startling results. Not only were the structures purifying the environment, but they also showed potential for accelerating human healing. "We need to initiate a series of controlled experiments," she announced, her eyes bright with excitement. "The medical applications of this element could be revolutionary." Outside the facility, the transformation continued unabated. The crystalline network grew, spreading across the desert floor like a living organism. In orbit, the Zanari fleet began construction on a series of platforms designed to amplify Earth's new protective field. As night fell, Jeffrey gathered the team for a status update. The holographic displays around them showed a world in flux, with the unknown element reshaping landscapes and cities across the globe. "We're standing at the precipice of a new era," Jeffrey said, his voice solemn. "But with this transformation comes great responsibility. We need to ensure that we're prepared for whatever challenges lie ahead." The team nodded in agreement, each of them acutely aware of the monumental task before them. As they dispersed to continue their work, Torres lingered for a moment, his hand once again touching the implant at the base of his skull. "Sir," he said, his voice low, I think I can hear them. The precursors. It's faint, but it's there." Jeffrey's eyes widened slightly, but he kept his composure. "Keep monitoring it, Torres. Any information you can glean could be crucial." As Torres nodded and turned to leave, Jeffrey looked out the window at the transformed landscape. The crystalline structures glowed softly in the darkness, a testament to the incredible changes taking place. He knew that this was just the beginning. The true test lay ahead, as humanity prepared to face the cosmic storm and take its place among the stars. As the team dispersed to continue their work, Torres found himself drawn to a quiet corner of the facility. The implant at the base of his skull tingled, a constant reminder of the experimental procedure he had undergone. He closed his eyes, focusing on the faint whispers that seemed to dance at the edge of his consciousness. Suddenly, a flood of information rushed through his mind. Images, symbols, and complex equations flashed before his eyes. Torres gasped, overwhelmed by the sheer volume of data pouring into his brain. "Dr. Gray," he called out, his voice strained. "I need you over here now." Dr. Gray rushed to Torres' side, concern etched on his face. "What's happening, Torres?" "The implant," Torres managed to say between ragged breaths. "It's interfacing with the precursor systems. I can see everything." Dr. Gray's eyes widened as he realized the implications. He quickly set up a neural interface, connecting Torres to the facility's main computer system. As Torres focused, streams of data began to flow across the screens. "This is incredible," Dr. Gray muttered, his fingers flying over the keyboard. "We're gaining access to vast stores of precursor knowledge." As Torres delved deeper into the alien data, he stumbled upon information about the approaching cosmic storm. His face paled as he understood the true nature of the threat. "Dr. Gray, we need to call an emergency meeting with the EDIC," Torres said urgently. "The storm. It's not natural. It's the result of an ancient conflict between advanced civilizations." Within hours, the Earth Defense and Integration Council convened. Torres, still reeling from his newfound abilities, presented his findings. The council members listened in stunned silence as he explained the origins of the cosmic storm and its potential consequences. Meanwhile, In another wing of the facility, Dr. Rodriguez worked tirelessly on her experiments with the unknown element. Her lab was a flurry of activity, as she and her team tested various applications of the mysterious substance. "We've done it!" Dr. Rodriguez exclaimed, her eyes shining with excitement. She held up a vial containing a shimmering liquid. "This compound has shown remarkable regenerative properties in our initial trials." The news of Dr. Rodriguez's breakthrough spread quickly through the facility. The EDIC approved limited human trials, and within days, patients with previously incurable conditions began to show signs of recovery. As these developments unfolded, Zara made significant progress with the neural interface translation system. She worked alongside a team of linguists and engineers, fine-tuning the algorithms that allowed for real-time communication with the precursor beings. "Initiating contact now," Zara announced, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface. The room fell silent as a precursor being materialized on a large screen before them. Its iridescent scales shimmered as it began to communicate, its thoughts seamlessly translated into human language. "Greetings, people of Earth." The being's voice resonated through the speakers. "We are pleased to establish this direct line of communication. There is much we must discuss regarding the challenges that lie ahead." As the exchange of knowledge and technology accelerated, Earth underwent a rapid transformation. Major cities around the globe saw the integration of crystalline structures into their existing infrastructure. New York's skyline now glittered with towering spires of energy-conducting crystal, while Tokyo's transportation system had been completely revamped with levitating vehicles that utilized the unknown element's properties. In orbit, the upgraded Harmony space station hummed with activity. Its enhanced sensors scanned the depths of space, monitoring the approaching cosmic storm and searching for any anomalies. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the station. Gaia's voice came over the comms, urgency evident in her tone. "We've detected a massive object at the edge of the solar system. It just appeared out of nowhere." Back on Earth, the EDIC scrambled to respond to this new development. They quickly authorized a joint human-Zanari expedition to investigate the mysterious artifact. As preparations for the expedition began, Dr. Gray and his team of engineers made a breakthrough in propulsion technology. By adapting precursor designs, they successfully created a prototype for a new class of interstellar vessels. "With these ships, we'll be able to explore beyond our solar system," Dr. Gray explained to the EDIC. "We can establish outposts on habitable worlds as a backup plan in case our defenses against the cosmic storm fail." The council members nodded gravely, acutely aware of the need for such contingencies. As Earth continued its rapid transformation, Torres's connection to the precursor technology grew stronger. During a routine interface session, he stumbled upon information that could change everything. "There's a network of ancient precursor outposts scattered throughout the galaxy," Torres reported to the EDIC. "If we can reactivate them, they might form a defensive grid capable of neutralizing the cosmic storm." The Council, recognizing the potential of this discovery, quickly authorized the formation of an elite team to locate and reactivate these outposts. Torres and Zara were selected to lead the mission. As they prepared for their departure, massive organic supercomputer-like structures began to form around the globe. These new formations processed and stored vast amounts of data, possibly containing the collective knowledge of the precursor civilization. Debate raged within the EDSC about the implications of these rapid changes. Some feared the loss of human identity, while others saw it as necessary for survival. Amidst this turmoil, reports came in from the Zanari fleet of unusual activity near the outer planets. Long-dormant precursor installations on several moons had begun to activate, emitting powerful energy signatures that interfered with sensor systems. With the situation growing more complex by the hour, Torres and Zara boarded their newly constructed interstellar vessel. The ship, a marvel of hybrid technology, stood ready on the launch pad, its crystalline components pulsing with energy. As final checks were completed, Torres and Zara exchanged a look of persistence. They knew the weight of responsibility that rested on their shoulders. The engines roared to life, and the ship lifted off, ascending rapidly through Earth's atmosphere. As they broke free of the planet's gravitational pull, the vast expanse of space opened up before them. Torres took a deep breath, his hand unconsciously moving to the implant at the base of his skull. "Initiating jump sequence," he announced, his voice steady despite the uncertainty that lay ahead. The ship's engines hummed, building to a crescendo as it prepared to make its first jump into uncharted space. In a flash of blinding light, the vessel disappeared, leaving behind a transformed Earth and a galaxy full of both promise and peril. The ship's engines hummed, building to a crescendo as it prepared to make its first jump into uncharted space. In a flash of blinding light, the vessel disappeared, leaving behind a transformed Earth and a galaxy full of both promise and peril. As Torres and Zara's mission to reactivate the precursor outpost began, Earth continued its rapid metamorphosis. The crystalline structures of the unknown element spread further, reshaping landscapes and cityscapes alike. In the Nevada desert, near the site of the original precursor landing, a new chapter in humanity's cosmic journey was about to unfold. Dr. Rodriguez wiped sweat from her brow as she studied the readouts on her tablet. The scorching desert sun beat down on her team as they huddled around a peculiar energy signature emanating from the sand. "This is unlike anything we've seen before," she muttered, adjusting her protective goggles. "It's similar to the precursor tech, but different somehow." One of her assistants called out, "Dr. Rodriguez, we've found something." She rushed over to see a section of the desert floor shimmer and dissolve, revealing a door made of the unknown element. Its surface rippled like liquid metal, defying the laws of physics. "Incredible," Dr. Rodriguez breathed. She ran her hand over the cool, smooth surface. "Let's see if we can open it." After hours of careful analysis and manipulation, the door finally yielded. It split down the middle, retracting into the surrounding sand with a soft hiss. The team stood at the threshold of a vast underground complex, its walls lined with pulsing bioluminescent veins. As they ventured deeper into the facility, their flashlights illuminated ancient consoles and dormant machinery. In the heart of the complex, they made a startling discovery. "Oh my God!" Dr. Rodriguez gasped, her voice barely above a whisper. Before them lay a Zanari female, motionless within a translucent pod. Tendrils of the unknown element snaked across her body, connecting her to an intricate life support system. "Is she alive?" one of the researchers asked. Dr. Rodriguez approached the pod, her scientific curiosity overriding her initial shock. She examined the readouts on a nearby console, her eyes widening as she deciphered the alien script. "Not only is she alive, but she's been in stasis for centuries," Dr. Rodriguez explained. "According to these logs, her name is Lyra. She was part of a Zanari expedition that vanished long ago." The team worked tirelessly to safely disconnect Lyra from the life support system. As they did, Dr. Rodriguez noticed something peculiar about the Zanari's genetic structure. "The prolonged exposure to the unknown element has altered her DNA," she mused, studying the results of a quick scan. "It's given her an unprecedented ability to interface with precursor technology." As they prepared to transport Lyra to a more advanced medical facility, Dr. Gray arrived on the scene. He immediately set to work examining the complex's systems, his fingers flying over holographic interfaces. "This isn't just any precursor facility," he announced, excitement evident in his voice. "It's a control hub for the entire network of unknown element structures on Earth. And I believe Lyra here is the key to unlocking its full potential." Hours later, in a sterile medical bay, Lyra's eyes fluttered open for the first time in centuries. Her gaze darted around the room, a mix of confusion and fear evident in her alien features. When she tried to move, her body refused to respond. Dr. Rodriguez leaned over her, speaking in a calm, reassuring tone. "Lyra, you're safe. We're here to help you." But Lyra's mind was overwhelmed by the flood of information pouring in through her connection to the precursor systems. Her mouth opened and closed, but no coherent words came out. Recognizing the need for specialized assistance, Dr. Rodriguez sent an urgent message to the EDIC. Within hours, a shuttle touched down outside the facility, and John Carter stepped out. Carter, a seasoned human explorer known for his work with unique alien physiologies, entered the medical bay with purposeful strides. He took in the scene before him, his experienced eyes noting every detail of Lyra's condition. "Let's start simple," he said, approaching Lyra's bedside. He made a series of gestures, combining them with images displayed on a nearby holographic interface. Slowly, painstakingly, Carter began to establish a rudimentary form of communication with Lyra. As the hours ticked by, her chaotic thoughts began to coalesce into coherent ideas. The storm, Lyra managed to convey through a combination of gestures and holographic symbols. Not natural, sentient. Carter's brow furrowed as he pieced together the information. "The cosmic storm is alive? Is that what you're saying?" Lyra's eyes widened in affirmation. She struggled to share more, her weakened body trembling with the effort. Through their improvised communication, Carter learned the true purpose behind the precursor's visit to Earth. The cosmic storm was an ancient, malevolent entity that consumed entire civilizations. The network established on Earth was part of a galaxy-wide defense system against this cosmic predator. As this crucial information came to light, alarms blared throughout the facility. Dr. Gray burst into the room, his face pale. "The storm's reached the outer edges of our solar system," he announced. "The Zanari fleet is reporting massive gravitational disturbances. We're out of time." Carter looked from Dr. Gray to Lyra, understanding dawning in his eyes. "We need to activate Earth's defensive network. Now." With fierce dedication, the team raced against time to integrate Lyra's unique abilities with the precursor systems. As they worked, the first tendrils of the cosmic storm began to claw at the edges of their reality. Lyra, despite her physical limitations, became the living interface between humanity and the ancient alien technology. As the defensive network surged to life, a shimmering barrier extended from Earth into the upper atmosphere. The strain on Lyra was immense. Her body convulsed as she channeled vast amounts of energy through her altered physiology. Carter stayed by her side, his hand gripping hers, anchoring her to the present as she navigated the overwhelming currents of precursor data. Just as it seemed Lyra might buckle under the pressure, a transmission cut through the chaos. Torres and Zara's voices, tinged with static, filled the control room. "We've done it," Torres announced. "The first outpost is online. Others are activating across the galaxy." A wave of relief washed over the team as the strain on Earth's defenses lessened. The combined power of the planetary network and the reactivated outposts pushed back against the cosmic storm's advance. As the immediate crisis subsided, Carter turned his attention back to Lyra. Her eyes met his, a newfound clarity shining within them. Though still unable to move, her mind was sharp, filled with the knowledge of eons. Carter squeezed her hand gently. "We've got a lot of work ahead of us," he said softly. "But together, I think we might just have a chance." Lyra's fingers twitched in response, the ghost of a smile playing across her alien features. As Earth stood firm against the cosmic storm, a new chapter in the alliance between humans and Zanari began to unfold. As Earth stood firm against the cosmic storm, a new chapter in the alliance between humans and Zanari began to take shape. In the days that followed, John Carter found himself drawn back to the medical bay where Lyra lay recovering. The Zanari's unique connection to the precursor technology had proven invaluable in Earth's defense, but the strain had taken its toll on her still weakened body. Carter pulled up a chair beside Lyra's bed, his eyes scanning the various monitors, tracking her vital signs. "How are you feeling today?" he asked, his voice soft with concern. Lyra's multifaceted eyes flickered open, focusing on Carter's face. She attempted to speak, but only a weak chirp escaped her lips. Frustration flashed across her alien features. "It's okay," Carter reassured her, gently placing his hand on hers. "Take your time. We'll figure this out together." Dr. Rodriguez entered the room, her tablet clutched tightly in her hands. "I think I might have a solution," she announced, her eyes bright with excitement. "I've been studying the regenerative properties of the unknown element, and I believe we can use it to accelerate Lyra's recovery." Carter listened intently as Dr. Rodriguez outlined her proposed treatment plan. It was a daring combination of precursor technology and cutting-edge medical techniques, designed to restore Lyra's mobility and strengthen her connection to the alien systems. "What do you think?" Carter asked Lyra, using the holographic interface they had developed to communicate. "Are you willing to give it a try?" Lyra's response came through as a series of pulsing lights and symbols. Her commitment was clear. She was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Over the next several weeks, Lyra underwent a series of intensive treatments. Carter remained by her side throughout, offering support and encouragement as she pushed through the pain and exhaustion. Slowly but surely, her condition began to improve. One morning, as Carter entered the medical bay, he found Lyra sitting up in bed, her slender fingers tracing patterns in the air. The unknown element responded to her touch, forming intricate designs that hovered in the space around her. "Incredible!" Carter breathed, watching in awe as Lyra manipulated the shimmering substance with unprecedented precision. Lyra turned to him, a smile playing across her alien features. "I can feel it," she said, her voice still weak but clearer than before. "The network, the outposts, everything." As Lyra's strength returned, so did her ability to interface with the precursor systems. She began to share vital information about the cosmic storm entity and the true purpose of the defensive network spread across the galaxy. Meanwhile, reports came in from Torres and Zara as they neared the final stage of their mission. They had reached the largest and most distant precursor outpost, located in a galaxy far beyond the Milky Way. "We've found something big," Torres's voice crackled through the communication channel. "There's an energy core here unlike anything we've seen before. We think it might be the key to neutralizing the storm entity once and for all." As Carter relayed this information to the EDIC, Lyra's eyes widened in recognition. "The synchronization pulse," she exclaimed. "It's the last resort of the precursors. If we can coordinate all the outposts, including Earth's network, we might be able to end this threat permanently." The EDIC quickly mobilized global resources to prepare for this coordinated effort. Lyra and Carter found themselves at the heart of Earth's operations, working tirelessly to fine-tune the planet's defenses and align them with the galactic network of outposts. As the day of the synchronized pulse approached, tension mounted across the globe. The cosmic storm entity, as if sensing the impending threat to its existence, intensified its assault on the solar system. Earth's shield strained under the increased pressure, with Lyra pushing herself to the limit to maintain its integrity. In the control room of the Nevada facility, alarms blared as the shield's energy levels began to fluctuate dangerously. Lyra stood at the center of a web of holographic displays, her body trembling with the effort of channeling the vast energies required to keep the defenses operational. Carter watched in growing concern as Lyra's vitals spiked to dangerous levels. Without hesitation, he stepped forward, placing his hands on the control interface beside her. "What are you doing?" Dr. Rodriguez called out in alarm. "What I have to," Carter replied, his mind focused. He closed his eyes, focusing on everything he had learned about the precursor systems and the unknown element. In his mind, he visualized the energy flowing through the network, and with a deep breath, he opened himself up to it. A jolt of energy surged through Carter's body as he connected to the system. For a moment, the sensation threatened to overwhelm him, but then he felt Lyra's presence in the network, steadying him, guiding him. Together, they stood as the linchpin of Earth's defenses, their minds intertwined with the alien technology that now permeated the planet. As one, they pushed back against the cosmic storm's onslaught, stabilizing the shield and securing humanity's last line of defense. With Earth's position secured, all eyes turned to the final outpost where Torres and Zara prepared to initiate the synchronized pulse. A countdown began, echoing across the galaxy as each precursor installation aligned its systems for the ultimate strike against the cosmic storm entity. In the Nevada control room, Carter and Lyra stood hand in hand, their bodies glowing with the energy of the unknown element. As the countdown reached 0, they felt a surge of power unlike anything they had experienced before. A blinding pulse of energy erupted from Earth, joining countless others from across the galaxy. The pulses converged on the cosmic storm entity, engulfing it in a dazzling display of light and power visible even from the surface of distant planets. For several tense minutes, the outcome remained uncertain as the entity writhed and contorted under the assault. Then, with a final silent flash, the cosmic storm dissipated, leaving behind a calm and empty expanse of space. As reports of the entity's defeat flooded in from across the galaxy, Earth erupted in celebration. The threat that had loomed over humanity and their allies for so long had finally been vanquished. In the control room, Carter and Lyra slowly disengaged from the precursor systems, their bodies weak but their spirits soaring. They looked at each other, a mix of exhaustion and elation in their eyes. "We did it," Carter said softly, his voice filled with wonder. Lyra nodded, her alien features softening into a smile. "Together," she replied, squeezing his hand. As the first light of dawn broke over the Nevada desert, Carter and Lyra stepped out of the facility, ready to face the new day and the challenges that lay ahead. The unknown element structures pulsed with renewed energy, a testament to the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. The defeat of the cosmic storm entity marked not an end, but a beginning. As Carter and Lyra watched the sun rise over the transformed landscape, they knew that their adventure was just the beginning. A new era of exploration and discovery stretched out before them, filled with possibilities they had yet to imagine.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.